And with that, we're live 10 minutes late because apparently Ocean had to get into a conversation with. He just escapes. Ocean had to get into an argument with Eve Kaninen, of all people. So, of course, we are here. So, how's it going, everybody? This is the first episode of Hammered Out. We're actually having Ocean back because he's been super busy lately. So instead of having,
I'm going to be gone again.
Yes,
But-
and then that's going to happen.
because Christmas is crazy for everybody. But happy Thursday, everyone, and we're here, me and Cirrus. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead again.
You've got a hammer. I've got a hammer now.
Okay.
Still need to replace it. It's kind of wobbly here.
What's going on with that wobbliness? Like we gotta do some hammer
So basically,
science here.
So after a few takes of like the episode where I was looking at a Godless Engineers talk with allegedly Dave, and I hit myself in the head with the hammer, found that the core inside this hammer, it's a plastic-ish, metal-ish core. It's hard to say what material it is. But the core itself, instead of being straight through the foam handle, it's at an angle in the handle. So whenever the hammer bends, instead of there being a stable core, there's a core that's bent in production. So eventually it snapped in half. So I had to take the two pieces, rip off clothes hanger, put the clothes hanger in there as a metal support for the core, and then rebind the handle. So this is only here and working because of a broken clothes hanger.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is the story behind that. And also, if anybody wants to see me repairing the hammer, it's actually on Shannon Q's channel. I was live on her channel discussing something with her and a few others while I was
doing
repairing
hammer
the hammer.
science.
Yes, while repairing the hammer.
I think this one is like a Marvel thing that somehow wound up at my house. I don't know how it got here.
It just happened to be there.
I didn't buy it. I don't know what happened. There was a bunch of people that came over to my house one time, left, and this was sitting on the table, and I was like,
Suddenly you have a hammer.
I have a hammer. Cool.
Also, apparently now not only do we both have hammers, but thanks to Pam, I'm also growing this thing for reasons, I guess.
Yeah, I've noticed that you've got a little bit of facial right there, some facial hairs. You're bearding up, sir. We'll make a Viking of you yet.
I'm already balding. We'll get there.
Right, there we go. Just shave it off, and then just start punching people randomly. I think that's how it works.
I think so too. So first things first. Before we get into any other information for today's episode, there is a reason why instead of using the standard hammered out setup that we normally do with the chat on one side and us at the bottom and a guest in the middle, is we decided very last second that one of the things we were going to be going over today.
It decided very last second because we didn't have a guest. Let's be fair. Because it's Christmas time, and
Originally it wasn't because we were this thing right here going over the video that I just did on my channel. It was because originally you said, "Oh, I have some issues with something you said in the video," and I was like, "Okay, we'll hash that out as the episode." And then we hashed it out over the course of 30 seconds and went, "Oh, yeah, well, we can't make a whole episode out of this."
I gave him a call and I was like, "All right, so the issue that is this going to be the same video, right?"
It's the same video.
Okay, so we can bring it up when it happens. But you brought up an argument about Spinoza's God, and I got mad at you. Like I watched the video when it came out, and I started yelling at the screen, and I didn't call you immediately because I'm not that kind of guy. But I was like yelling at the video, thinking that you would hear me. That didn't happen. So anyway. I wound up calling up Cirrus and being like, "Well, I have some objections about what you did in your video, and we can talk about that." And Cirrus was like, "Oh, sure, okay, cool." And then I called him and told him, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, I agree with you." And I was like, "Well, damn it! I thought we were going to disagree. Why didn't we disagree?"
No, because I think your objection to how I used it in the video doesn't actually change the point I ultimately meant in the video itself.
No, it doesn't. It just changes like how you're arguing. In other news, I guess I want to plug on modern day debate, modern day hysteria. I showed up and debated a street preacher on the concept of open theism, which is a really, really weird form of Christianity. Me and this guy, John from Anchored Alliance Ministries or Evangelism or something, was we met, talked for a little while, and then he knows modern day debate, and he wanted to have a conversation with me about open theism with me as a polytheist, and that was I was surprised by that, but I was like, sure, let's do it. The resulting debate is definitely interesting.
So you mentioned that there were some times where you wanted to yell at the screen when looking at my video. While I was listening to the debate between you two, I wanted to yell at the screen as well, because as I got to those points, you saw me just kind of message you on Facebook like, "What? He did not just say the thing he just said."
To get everybody kind of up to speed on that, open theism is an idea it's a minority among Christians, but it is the idea that God is traveling through time with us. So he's not external from time, he's actually contained in time, and so he's experiencing things and changing his mind and moving through the narrative at the same speed that we are. And that has all kinds of like fun entailments that I was just like, wait a minute,
stripping God of so many powers that
he doesn't have omnipotence, he doesn't have omniscience, and so on. And I sent this to a couple of pagan friends of mine, and I was like, what do you guys think of this? Do you see the same thing that I'm seeing? And they're like, yeah, this means he's just one of our gods. Like, he fits into the whole...
Yeah, it just puts him into little g pantheon. At that point, his ideas would not necessarily fall terribly outside of the scope of like henotheism. Because at that point, it's just...
He even said he believes Thor exists.
Is he just a monolateralist? Is that what he is?
He believes that Thor is a demon.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, and we put the link to that in the description, I guess, so that if somebody wants to check that out,
I'm gonna make sure that the link is in the description. But because of the wobbly nature of how this is set up,
don't do it now, but we should put the link out there. Because that debate is interesting, and I think that people would probably get a kick out of it. But it's a modern day hysteria, and it's me and this an Anchored Alliance Evangelism is what he goes by.
And I think we should definitely point out more than anything that the guy does not seem unreasonable. There's nothing
nice dude.
Yeah, there's nothing that we have against it. Just the argumentation seems flawed. Which is
like
fine.
The position is strange, and like. Honestly, as far as a Christianity, it's a Christianity, like as an image of Christianity that I can somewhat appreciate. I think that it flies in the face of a few things, but it's definitely unorthodox, like Christianity, right? Like it's definitely not Calvinist. Like the guy and a Calvinist would explode at each other just straight up, because they believe in different gods. Like it's clear.
They just call them both the Father God, but they are most certainly not the same.
It's all the same words, all the same name, except they just have completely different definitions of what it means. So, like the Calvinist believes in a God external from time. This guy believes in a God that's contained in time.
To put it in
universe almost.
To put it in terms that make it very, very easy to understand, it would be like if another polytheist believed in Thor, but they called Thor a water god.
Or if it's similar to like atheopagans that say that Thor is like a metaphorical concept. Like we both believe in Thor, but it's not. It's kind of like the Spinoza's God thing. Like it's a completely different definition. Yeah. So, with this guy, and a Calvinist, they would be just at each other's throats because one of them is an idolater to the Christian understanding.
And one of them necessarily has to be.
Or they both are.
They're exclusionary to each other at that point.
Right. They cancel out each other's beliefs. So he tries to explain this to me and then debate me on it as a polytheist, and that it changes. I throw him definitely a couple of curveballs. What did you think of it? Because you got to the end of the debate aspect of it, right?
Yeah, I'm still going through. I need to listen to the question and answer portion at the end, but the debate itself. So some of the things that he said bothered me, and your responses to them made sense. If I pull one of them up, because I actually did make a note of one that I sent to you. Let me just pull that up real quick. Of course,
we can play it in the side here. I know we have this other guy pulled up, but
of course, when I actually need my when I need my phone to operate at a particular speed, that's when it's going to move slowly.
You're gonna play it over your phone? Just put it in.
No, I'm not going to play it over the phone. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go to the portion of the debate, mainly because I don't have it pulled up already, and I'd have to cycle through. But okay, so one of the things that he claims in there is that he says that God is still all powerful, yet he's limiting the scope of God's abilities by making him move through time with us and making it to where he doesn't have any power over free will. Basically, God is almost not really that much different than just a deistic entity at this point.
Well, except that he's like heavily influencing things. So
he's heavily influencing things, but not really at the same time. The way this guy is wording it.
Even a deistic God is outside of time, so I don't know.
True, and his God is that's one of the other things. If his God is within time, then his God is constrained by time, which limits his power as well. But the thing that I pointed out, there was a point where he said that you can make the claim that anybody who has the ability to see what actual path the world is going to go down, the one path that time is going to take on whatever line you're on, that person would have more power than this God. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because if we're talking ontologically, which is, if we're dealing with God, at least this kind of God, then we're dealing with ontological issues. The idea that this God can see all possible timelines or know which timeline is actually going to be the straight and narrow, which is not what he's believes, that's an issue of knowledge. That's an issue of omniscience. That's not an issue of power. That's a separate issue. They're both omni traits, but they are also separate omni traits. And he's saying that, well, one being would have more power by having more knowledge here. Those are colloquial definitions of knowledge and power, because we always...
Yeah, no, I should have... That's a good point. I didn't think about that in the moment. I just kind of was just like, I was looking at levels of ability.
Yeah, no. When I heard that, I was like, well, if you're talking about an ontological being, then knowledge and power are necessarily separate, and you're trying to say that they're the same. That doesn't work.
I think that we were talking about like the power to look into the future versus not having that power. So I mean, there is an ability wording there.
Yes.
The thing that I found was really interesting about it is he still held that God was omniscient and omnipotent.
But his definitions have limited God's power to the point where once you have limited God's power below the logically possible, because I'm fine accepting omniscience as everything that's logically possible, right? You can't square a circle, but you can still do everything within within your ability. But as soon as you start limiting the things that it's logically possible to do, it's logically possible for God to lie. He did at least hold that God could lie. I was at least happy that he did that.
I was surprised by that,
because usually
I don't have a Christian that bites so many bullets like he does.
Usually you've got God can only do that which is within his nature, and therefore, since God is all good, even though good is a Christian concept only, you don't find that in a lot of other older theisms. You have issues of justice, but not necessarily issues of internal good or evil. When he says something like, God is all good, but God can't lie, he does not say that, which is good, because when anybody else says that, you've stripped God of power, and now you as a human being can do something God can't do.
But he didn't have problem providing limitations. But he was biting the bullet and saying that this is fine to provide limitations.
But by providing limitations, especially limitations within a human framework, you are at what point is this being omnipotent as opposed to maximally powerful? Because I don't agree that those are the same thing. I don't think those are the same thing at all. I know that there are some theologians that try to put the two together. I think William Lane Craig does in some of his arguments, conflates maximal power with omnipotence as being the same thing. I don't agree. I think that maximum power, maximum that you can get, whereas omnipotence is literally everything.
Yeah.
So... But
that winds up. He had a problem with that because it was from Plato rather than from the Bible. You're trying, because he was saying that you shouldn't interpret the Bible from Greek philosophy. You should interpret the Bible as it is, and that's a position I can at least somewhat respect. I think that rebelling against Greek philosophy in that way winds up just rebelling against logic, I guess. Does that make sense?
Because
that's all that Neoplatonism is trying to do with like a God concept and a prime mover, Aristotelian philosophy is going to be talking about a prime mover that's outside of time. You know, if you want to believe that God is the greatest of all things ontologically, then you would wind up with a prime mover type deity. But that's not what he's worshiping. He's worshiping something else. So
he's worshiping something that's working. He's worshiping something that is within.
One of the Calvinist or him, one of them is an idolater, and I don't know which one that it is really.
No,
because I think that scripturally he was actually really well structured and could defend himself pretty well. I think in a debate with another Christian, he'd do really well. When against me as a non-Christian, and then just like fitting him into polytheistic framework, it was he didn't do as well, I don't think.
No, I think debate between him and RCA would be interesting.
Oh, I'd love that.
In fact,
goodness,
I could actually contact RCA about that today and just be like, hey, is this a thing you need to do?
That would be a lot of fun, because RCA is like really big into Calvinism. So the two of them going, ooh.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting conversation. RCA, if you're listening,
I would watch the living hell out of that.
If RCA is listening to this, then that is a thing that we are requesting at some point. But
dude, I'm gonna send John a message just being like, dude, you need to go against RCA because he's a Calvinist that would just be so heavily triggered by everything that you have to say. I'm just gonna send him the debate between me and John and be like, dude, RCA, you want to bite at this guy? Because this is like, he wants to debate a Calvinist. He wants it bad. So I would love to see John go against a Calvinist, because he's a good debater. John is. I've not like he knew how to defend his worldview in a scriptural understanding, and he was structured well in debating. It's just that when it got outside of his like territory in the Bible and got into more of like philosophy, that's when he starts getting out of his depth. Right.
That said, we do have a super chat. It was a little earlier, but I didn't want to say it just yet. But Commander Zoot Helsing said, "Hail Cirrus, hail chat, Odin's blessings," for $2.
Awesome. So with that, you want to what's this video that we've got? I've watched. I think I saw one video with this Nathan guy.
Yes,
he's a Nathan guy.
He's a Nathan guy named Nathan Guy, and he's a guy named Nathan Guy.
Excellent. The puns will roll.
Yes, guy.
So Dude Buddy has got this speech that he's got. So I saw your first thing about it. It seems like it's one of those like really straightforward, I'm going to argue against atheism, and he's going to argue
against naturalism.
Okay, is he a young earther?
I don't know. He never specifies if he's a young earther.
Got it.
And he says that he doesn't say it outright that there's only two worldviews, either naturalism or Christianity, but the way that he structures his argument is as if those are the only two positions, and that's one of the things that I kind of take issue with. I'm like, you're not saying this directly, but the way you're wording this makes it seem like those are the two options, and there's all these other options here. Like he says that, naturalism holds that all religions are false. I'm like, wait, no? There's naturalistic religions. He's like, naturalism holds that no gods.
Well, I mean, I guess that's what I can see what he would mean by that, but
it's still a straw. If you're gonna present that in front of an audience, though, to me that's just a straw man.
Naturalistic religions are really rare, though. Like, let's be fair. I'm trying to think of one. I can't name one off the top of my head.
I named about 5 or 6 during that.
You're better than me. Which ones did you?
Believe one of them was actually naturalistic Taoism was one of them.
If you put naturalistic on the front of it, then sure. Like you could do that with Taoism. What's another one?
Hold on, I have the list pulled up. 1 second.
Okay. Yep. Naturalistic Taoism is a naturalistic faith. Sure. Asshole.
Hey. Oh, where the hell is it?
God damn it.
Where the hell is it? I have it in here in just a second. Where are you?
He's finding the list.
Did I lose it? Did I lose the
twice. He's going to figure out which religions are naughty or naturalist.
I think
That came
I may
out
have
better than I
lost
thought it
it.
was going to.
I think I may have actually lost it.
You've
I
lost
have.
the list. You're a bad Santa.
Yes, I am. I'm a horrible, horrible
Terrible
list.
Santa.
Also, but when one thing that does come up when I'm looking for the list here is there is an Answers in Genesis article on the religion of naturalism. If that counts for anything.
Fuck me, get out of my house. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's start listening to this dude. This without further ado.
Okay, and for everybody in the chat, this is the video that I responded to in the last two videos on my channel, but we'd like to hear Ocean's response to some of the things here as opposed to my response. Everybody already knows what I think about some of these things.
Yeah, like I was wondering, like, are we gonna get into like just we're watching two videos that you made this week again through doing this podcast? But no, I guess we'll see what kind of my opinion is on some of this guys, because I've seen like I saw the first video. I didn't watch the second video. And the first video I was just like, huh? Through a lot of it. So I guess we'll see this guy's speech. Let's listen to Dude Buddy.
Today we're going to talk about
Nathan
worldviews.
Guy.
That's what I'd like to talk to you about. What it is that you think about life's big questions. So I'll ask the obvious introductory question, what's a worldview? Is that working? Where do I point this?
Technical difficulties
these are-
already. The poor guy.
These are the parts that I left out of my video
Okay.
because I didn't want to address his
How about
technical
that?
issues.
Okay. And Google,
I already have to
source
address
of
my own.
knowledge and wisdom says
Well, we have our own
that
technical
a
issues. so-
worldview is a particular philosophy of life or a conception of the world. So whatever you think life is all about, that's your
so
worldview.
he's using
And
worldview
worldviews are
the same
important.
way that
Because like a
Alan
house
Watts
has a
uses myth.
foundation, you have a worldview. Everything that you do comes out of your worldview, even when you aren't consciously aware of it. What you think determines what you do and where you go in life. And so if your thinking is based on truth about life and the universe and reality and what that all is, then you're going to spend your life well. But if you misunderstand the nature of reality
pause it.
and what
So you might have the same objection that I did when I had that.
He's already arguing against free will. I don't know if he knows it. But yeah, what was your issue here?
My issue here was he says that if you believe only true things, then you're going to have a better life. And I said, no, not necessarily. There is the whole ignorance is bliss thing. There is the idea that like for a child, you have to, if you're a parent of a child, was the example I gave, you have to weigh the benefits versus the cost. If their pet dies, of telling them whether the pet ran away or whether the pet actually dies, you have to figure out which one of those two your child is going to be able to cope with better. And for some children, it's going to be one. For some children, it's going to be other. But in both, it completely negates this idea that believing in the truth just makes your life better as a matter of principle.
So, like, I don't necessarily have like as much of an issue with that as you do. I do think that I think it's wrong. Like, and I think I agree with everything that you said, but it's kind of like, all right, well, I can see how believing in true things could be it can be generally more advantageous than not. You can nitpick it to death, I guess, but because I agree with everything that you said, but like, I think generally you can say that it's gonna, if you're living a life that's going to be grounded in reality, you're going to be at least more equipped than someone who's not, I guess. Does that make?
Yeah, I would agree that you'd be more equipped to deal with certain situations. But for
doesn't mean you're
instance,
going to be happier.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to be happier. It doesn't mean you're going to be living a better life. As much as there are some very militant atheists who would say that no, you need to only be concerned with what's true. I agree, but even only being concerned with what's true still does not say whether or not it makes your life better or happier. It just tells you what your focus is going to be.
Someone just sent me a DM that says this guy is an Aussie. Enough said. I don't know what that means.
Well,
But-
if this person who sent you the DM is a flat earther, Australians don't exist. So enough
I'm
said.
gonna go with that. Australians don't exist. That's what she's saying. There's no Australian. So all right. I guess let's continue with this dude.
life is, you might live it the wrong way and you might regret it. You might feel like you've wasted your life. So we need to examine our foundations we need to know whether our worldview corresponds with reality. We need to know if what we believe about the universe and life and God is true. So today I want to compare for you two different competing worldviews, two different accounts of reality that both claim to be true. And the first one is called the philosophy of naturalism.
Of course.
Naturalism is the view that only natural laws and
So-
forces operate in the world.
So there's one thing I didn't point out here. I pointed out in my second video. But he starts out by talking, basically he's saying he's going to be talking about philosophical naturalism. But
Yeah,
through
yeah.
the video, he's going to bring up several methodological naturalists who are not philosophical naturalists.
Oh.
So it begins with an assumption
Oh.
that there are only natural things and absolutely nothing supernatural. Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer, said that
Yeah,
the
that-
cosmos
he's
is
not-
all there is,
All
all
right.
that is, all
Do you see what I meant?
Yeah, no, it's okay. So Carl Sagan was like, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson. DeGrasse is a committed agnostic. Both of them are.
Mm-hmm.
They are not like philosophical naturalists. They were the kind of people that were like, well, I'm open, you know.
I'm open to
Carl
the
Sagan-
idea.
Carl Sagan's wife, on the other hand, is an avowed atheist, but and I believe still is. I think she's still around. But Carl Sagan himself retained that he made arguments against the idea of a god, but he didn't. He retained that he was agnostic, and that might have been for PR purposes. I believe that Neil deGrasse Tyson's position seems to be more genuine. Like he's not doing it for PR purposes. I don't know if Carl Sagan was. I'm not accusing him of it either. I'm just saying he might have been given the time. It's more about the time than him. But you know, both of them from their statements were agnostics, not necessarily atheists. And then trigger alarm with all the people saying, but agnostics are atheists. So I mean, fine, sure, whatever. But philosophically is what I'm talking about here. If this guy's talking about philosophical naturalism, Carl Sagan was not a philosophical naturalist; he was methodological.
You're gonna see a lot of that. By the way, this is not an isolated thing. He's going to bring up Einstein. He's going to bring up at least, I think, 6 other quote minds.
Einstein's got like several quotes regarding God. Like
Yeah.
he talks about, I don't know what he necessarily meant. He might have meant like a Spinoza's God, but he does talk about God a lot. I don't know what that means for his beliefs, though. He might have been
the thing
philosophical.
the
not
thing
sure.
that well the thing that gets me about, like, especially this quote, and I bring it up in the video, is not just that Carl Sagan is not a philosophical naturalist.
Cosmos, the word cosmos.
The word cosmos, when the guy's like, well, the cosmos is the universe, and the universe is all that is, and I'm like, that's not what Sagan meant. Cosmos was an umbrella term where the universe fit into it, but the universe was not all that is. The cosmos still allows for other things to be there besides just our universe.
Sagan was a smart cookie. Like he knew that the universe wasn't all there was.
No, this guy with the man bun knows
Use the
better.
word cosmos.
This guy with the man
Right.
bun knows better.
Oh, it does he? Good. Okay. Excellent. So we'll listen to this guy with a man bun.
was or ever
Aussie
will
bun.
be. In other words, only the universe and the things that it's made out of exist. And so under naturalism, everything
And
that
again,
happens
no,
has
that's
a
not what he
natural
meant.
cause or
Yeah.
explanation. Everything can be explained by matter and energy and time, chance, the interaction of atoms and molecules and forces in chemistry and physics. And in this view, there are no immaterial realities, no spirits, good or evil, no souls in the human person. And even you, your mind and your idea and your consciousness, all of that stuff is actually just a physical brain and electrical impulses firing in that brain. That's what naturalism says that you are. So if we look at the big life questions, it says God does not exist because nothing immaterial or spiritual exists. The universe exists as a result of natural, random, purposeless processes. It wasn't created for any particular reason by any particular thing. There's no real meaning to life on this view. So you get to make it up. And people are interesting biological organisms, but really, there's nothing that valuable or special about us. We're just robots made out of meat.
That's
In
I don't
fact,
know
Francis
if they're
Crick-
saying that.
No, it's not saying that we're robots made out of meat. There's several naturalistic views that that don't say that you are a robot made out of meat. It just accepts that you happen to have a mind. That's it.
Determinism and free will is that argument pops up in the naturalist community pretty often as well, and you have people on both sides of it. I think it leans determinist, which you would be able to try to make the robot accusation, but I brought this up in the debate with John that we were referencing earlier, that free will doesn't necessarily mean very much. It means that, instead of robots, you're just a random actor. And that becomes even more concerning when talking about God's justice, that he's sending people to hell randomly. That's in the Q&A period, but that's like this idea that people say, well, we're robots. The reason why the wording of robots resonates with people is that people see robots as impersonal, whereas humans, regardless of whether or not we're in a determined universe, are personal. The determinism doesn't have an effect on whether or not we care about each other. we don't care about robots. We do care about humans, and whether or not our free will is at risk in the conversation doesn't have any effect on whether or not we give a shit about each other. So
I know the idea of
meaning. You can have meaning in a deterministic universe. Hell, Calvinists exist, right? So with the Christian worldview, you still have humans being impersonal, like even more arguably impersonal robots than what naturalism supposes. So, and naturalism doesn't even have a consistent suppose on this. There's several ideas about how the human brain works in the naturalist worldview, even with just like simply I don't know with regards to the understanding of will or consciousness or any other such, like that little family of ideas that usually a lot of these arguments rest on. What do you think? I was like that. I take a serious issue with him just saying naturalism equals human robots.
I take issue with it as well, because it's a way of saying in this worldview you are less than what you yourself view yourself as. Like, for instance, I don't view myself as a robot, and even if I did, I would still probably take offense to that, because it would then be saying, well, I view myself as a robot. Are you saying that robots are less than any other thinking, breathing being? Because then you start going, well, as long as a being has sapience, we can elevate it to the same standard that literally every other human being is. That's one of the things that makes us who we are, is we have sapience. And saying that, well, in this worldview, people are less than that. I find it a little repugnant, maybe a little insulting, but that's just me at that point.
I'm a robot, but like the Terminator in Terminator 2, I've now learned emotion, and I know why you cry. So I guess let's continue with this guy.
Okay. I think did I find it? No, that's not where I had it. Never mind.
Oh, you've been looking for that list?
He said your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions.
Is this another methodological?
Identity and free will.
I don't know if Francis Crick is a methodological.
Of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. You're just a biological machine on this view.
But he is making the assertion that there's
And the last bit, which I think we're probably familiar with, on the big question about religion, naturalism says that all religion is pre-scientific, man-made mythology. And it has this attitude associated with it. If you believe that stuff, you're stupid. Who's come across that attitude before? If you believe this religion stuff, you're stupid.
I've come across that attitude before, in fairness, so I guess I'll
talk about
give that to him sometimes.
Yeah, I could give that to him. Only problem is that it's not. It's
not comprehensive, but
it's not comprehensive to all naturalists. No, just lost my phone.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. It's gone forever. It's in the abyss.
There it goes.
Fuck it. And Christianity, obviously, because I'm passionate about the gospel, the message of salvation in Jesus Christ. I think it's the most important message that I could talk with you about.
I hear the laughter. I imagine
I I love when Christians do this. They're just like, all of this is just man-made mythology, and then they start talking about, well, it is, but ours isn't. That's what's implied, and when he's talking about I'm very passionate about the gospel, so I'm going to start making these arguments that would honestly work for several of these religions, but I'm going to just say that it works for mine. Like, I don't know that he's going to do that, but that's I see it so often where they're like, they start to say, well, Christianity isn't like those silly Greek gods.
It's like, but how is it different besides the fact that your God is less logically consistent?
Right. It's like, you're right, it's more absurd. That's the reason why it's not like them. But I just see that a lot, and I laughed. I couldn't help but laugh at it. So let's continue.
But it's this view of naturalism that forms an enormous roadblock to the advance of the gospel by saying that there is no God, there's just nature. So this view stops people from reading the Bible or even taking Christianity seriously as a viable.
It doesn't stop people from reading the Bible. Like, no, okay.
In fact, actually, the point I made here was that more atheists read their Bibles.
I'll make the same point. Like, that naturalists, like, usually, like, people that are like really serious about naturalism, when you bump into a religion conversation with them, usually they know their not only their Bible very well, but some of them like get into their ecclesiastical history pretty well. Like,
You seem to be having some of the same frustrations that I did.
Yeah, I think that some of the frustrations that he's making are pretty straightforward, or some of the mistakes he's making are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's like you get atheists. They're naturalists. Like, I believe Pauly G is a naturalist, at least. Well, he holds to be open to the idea of God, but I think he's a methodological naturalist. He may correct me. Pauly G just might come shooting out of nowhere. Like, no, but he's definitely an atheist, and he holds against this. He knows his Bible pretty damn well, and he knows like church history actually pretty good too. So, I don't think that naturalism is stopping people from reading the Bible.
No,
it might be inspiring some skepticism when looking at it, but I think it's a healthy thing.
Yeah, what I generally find is that a lot of atheists specifically, and I'm talking in the colloquial sense right now, because we made the distinction earlier, so I'm going to make the distinction now just to make sure.
Might be a colloquial atheist as well. I don't know if philosophical one.
But I know that one of the things.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Paul comes in, just has a third hammer. I'm here for all of you. But
we got to send this to him.
I generally find that with a lot of atheists, they find, especially here in the South, that they have to deal with Christians telling them who they are, who they aren't, so often that a lot of times they just end up reading their Bible as a defense mechanism. Yeah. They start learning the passages so that when somebody says
their homework, because the conversation's going to come up. Like, I wound up doing that as a pagan too. Like, I've installed eSword on my computer, and I have the NRSV translation installed on it, which wasn't the cheapest thing in the world, but eSword's free, by the way, I believe. I think it is. Anyway, eSword is this really cool Bible application, and where you can scroll through like all these windows and stuff and books, and you can go directly to specific verses. It's really great when Christians start throwing scripture at you, because you're like, click, 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 click. All right, cool. I'm right there with you. And you can check them on it and call them out on bullshit, because you can easily look at context.
You can
only have this because
it seems like a good auto exegesis tool.
Yeah, and it has Strong's Concordance in it, so you can start clicking on the specific words and see the Hebrew, and when they start throwing those arguments at you, like, it's a really awesome like tool for debate. And the reason why I have it is for debate, because when Christians start throwing scripture at you in a way that, like, when it's relevant to the argument, it's great to just have like Strong's Concordance and a quick access to each verse that they're talking about right there at your fingertips at a couple of clicks. So sponsor me, eSword. But
I think that's actually a thing that I'm going to end up getting because there's a lot of videos, especially when I'm dealing with.
I think that eSword's going to get a couple of downloads from this, but
yeah, when I'm dealing with like biblical literalists, that's when I'm always having to look up. Okay, what's the Greek for this? What's the Hebrew for this? Like when you have to go through.
It has all of that in Strum's.
Yeah, when you have to go through Levitical law, and you're like, okay, let's parse out what this actually meant back then. Okay.
Yeah, and it has like context of the multiple meanings for the words and different contexts that it was used. It's Strom's Concordance, and Strom's Concordance has criticisms of it, but it's a good starting place for the conversation. Definitely a good program to have. Anyway, I can't remember how that is associated with the rest of the conversation. But no. The reason why I have that is because I get into conversations with Christians about all kinds of things. And even though I don't give a wooden nickel about Christianity anymore, it's still, Christians still come at me with various accusations or with various objections that have to do with their text. And so having this is useful. I wind up still reading the Bible just because it's relevant. And that happens with atheists constantly and naturalists constantly. It's like, well, no, the Bible says, and you can just dismiss the Bible all day, but sometimes it can be worth it to get into the nitty-gritty with them.
Well, especially when you've got passages like it's
Romans 1:20.
Yeah, Romans 1:20. Just freaking, everybody knows of God. I'm like, no, they don't. Stop saying that. That's not what he meant then either. Stop it. Paul, in that context, was talking to a church of people who knew God because it was part of their culture, and they rejected it at one point, and that's why he went to that church and talked to them about that issue. It is not a global statement for all people. Holy fucking shit!
Yeah. Anyway, bottom line, this idea that naturalism is stopping people from reading their Bible is stupid. It's just, and if anything, it's like inspiring them to. So, all right, go ahead.
And so the people that we want to reach for Jesus Christ, some of them either believe this view of naturalism or they're impacted by it in some way and they aren't ready to hear the gospel. If you don't think that there's such a thing as a God or a spiritual reality, why would you listen to someone wanting to talk to you about it? So we might need to be able to disrupt their confidence in their worldview if we're going to be able to share the gospel with them. So I think we have a responsibility to know about this if we want to reach our culture for Christ. The other reason I want to talk about this with you is that young people, often when they get to the age they're attending university, that's the time that they're most likely to leave the church and to leave Christianity and lose their faith.
So what I'm getting here is when people get more educated, they start to leave the faith as they educate themselves. Oops.
I mean, it's a trend that's true. So let's assume for a second that Christianity is correct. This is a concern he's going to have. Like, fine. But I do think that it's funny where he's like, we're going to disrupt naturalism here today, guys. We're going to disrupt it. It's going to be good. But that was what I was laughing at, where he's just like, let's turn the whole naturalism worldview on its head. And I'm saying this is not as a non-naturalist. I just thought that is the way that he said that was just funny. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is definitely a trend that, I left Christianity while I was in college. But it didn't have much to do with like the classes I was taking. It just had to do with like,
I think it just has to do with
experiences and research and like reading, because I was like really into the Bible.
People being exposed. What I generally find is not because people went to take a theology class. So there are a lot of people who come out of seminary atheists. It's not so much that people
Skylar fiction, right?
Yeah. It's not so much that people go into college and college tells them, okay, the Bible is wrong, God is bad, God is dead. I am a philosophy teacher. God is dead. Debate me, bro, and we're gonna make a movie off of it because none of that fucking shit happened.
Honestly, I went to a Christian college and I left the faith in college.
I think what happens though is that you've got people who are isolated. Usually, you're isolated to your hometown or you're isolated to your family and your immediate surroundings. Once you get to college, you start to get exposure to everybody around you. And unlike exposure through work, which typically if you're dealing with your entry-level positions, there's not a whole lot of chatting going on, at least not that it's allowed. It still happens, but I know that like fast food jobs that I worked at, a lot of them said, we don't want you talking, and sometimes I'd be the asshole who was just like, science just determined that I can move my hands and my mouth at the same damn time. But no, I was snarky. It's why I got promoted to manager. I don't know how that worked, but it did. It was weird. But what happens though is in college there's a lot of conversation, a great deal of conversation that goes on. And when you're being exposed to these different worldviews, people's kind of had that icebreaker moment in their first year where they go, oh, wait a minute, there are people in this world who don't think the same way me and my family do.
Uh-oh.
How do I come to terms with that? They start to become more accepting of other ideas about the world. And so sometimes through that acceptance, they start to realize that maybe their reason for believing what they did was flawed. Some people come out of college that were atheists and come out Christians because they realize that their justification for being atheists was wrong, and vice versa. People go in as Christians and come out atheists because their justifications for being Christian basically boiled down to, my parents told me.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure, like, because I don't know if I remained a Christian for so long it was because my parents told me. I started, like, getting into it and justifying it and researching other religions when I was around 16.
I was doing that around when I was like, was it 12? No, it was 10. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That was way early. But that's all. No, it was when I was 12. But that's because specifically one of my best friends that I met through World of Warcraft was a pagan. And so I started having to do research because I was being told that I shouldn't be friends with people who were pagans and who were.
That's right. And he was like a chill dude.
But yes.
Oh, she, yeah.
And we're still friends. But I was just like, well, I'm a Christian and you're a pagan, and we don't have issues with one another except the issues that I'm told to have with you. Why is
Funny
that?
Story. I got into like a fight with a friend of mine that was not a physical fight, but it was like a strongly worded discussion, I guess, with a friend of mine in high school who was pagan. I was like, that's stuff the devil. That's dangerous. You shouldn't be messing with that man. And now look at me.
Yeah,
it's funny like how things kind of change on that front.
Well, it's like I had a friend who was Wiccan, and his girlfriend was Catholic, and I was super excited as a Christian when like he said that he was converting to Catholicism, and now I'm just like, damn it, you should have just stayed a fucking Wiccan, please.
Well, I would say that, converting from Wicca to Catholicism is not a huge change. It's not too bad. Anyway, let's continue with this dude.
And often, this view of naturalism is the reason that they give. Naturalism has an influence on politics, on education, what it is that you're taught in schools, and all sorts of all various forms of media. And together,
all right, pause it again. This motherfucker. All right, so reason why, like this is like the big thing that I have a problem with Christians specifically, is that Christians seem to think that teaching science in a science classroom is a problem.
Yeah.
Like, this is for me, like, you can believe that in a created universe, right? Is that of whatever God, right? It shouldn't be taught in a science classroom. If anything, it should be taught in a philosophy classroom or a comparative religion classroom. Not in a science classroom.
And
because
to be fair,
conversation about the gods, any conversation about his God is going to be off topic in a science classroom because his God is not capturable by science. I don't know what it is about Christians that think that this is a problem. When science in the science classroom, they freak out about.
Well,
it's like, no, we need to cater to my belief system. No, nobody does. There is a system, a method of science that has certain achievements. The point of a science classroom is to learn about those achievements and learn about that methodology and system that has been so damn successful because it applies in life. Fuck this shit about, we need to have like a blurb in there about, my 6,000-year-old Earth in my Kansas textbook on science talking about evolution of all things. Like, give me a fucking break. Hey, there's my rant.
I definitely agree. I do think whenever Christians say that religion should be taught in schools, universally they mean their religion. They don't mean comparative religion. I very rarely come across Christians who want a comparative religions course. They want a course on the Bible.
I mean, the biblical study courses, I mean, that could exist, but it would be a biblical study course. It's not as an instructive.
At that point, it wouldn't be it would be more of a history course than anything. The history of the Bible, why it was created the way it was, what we know about the particular authors, which authorships are true, which authorships may or may not be true, which letters from Paul are accepted, etc. Like all of those would be conversations in that course, but none of them would be the philosophical justifications for God existing.
Yeah, I guess we can go back to this guy. I made my rant.
Well, we do have two super chats. We do have one from Klaus Schumier. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly.
I love what he said. That's funny.
Thanks for the laugh. This dude needs Bible in ass.
He didn't say needs a Bible in the ass. He
needs Bible in ass. And then Commander Zoot gave us another $2 super chat. Have a wonderful Samhain. I'm off.
Okay.
We also do have a bit of a ranter in the chat. I'm not going to acknowledge him past that, but I do enjoy the entertainment I'm getting from it.
Form a narrative that Christianity is stupid and it's unscientific and it's dangerous.
Name me a science classroom that says Christianity is stupid and dangerous because science.
Well, it depends if you're talking about creationism.
I'm not talking about young Earth creationism. I'm talking about
if you're talking about
Christianity.
Like the Savior Jesus Christ. No, that's not a thing that comes up in a science classroom, nor should it. The idea that is stupid is, if there's any science teacher that's saying that or bringing it up in a classroom, that's definitely a huge issue.
Yeah, that's an issue for a philosophy class
because it's off topic.
It has nothing
science
to do.
Classroom. It is nothing to do with the methodology of science. There's a reason why you're not talking about there's a reason why we're not talking about the Revolutionary War in a science classroom, even though it might be real and have existed. Well, it's not science.
Well, we do have to talk about the Civil War because obviously science has told us that pterodactyls didn't exist during the Civil War, but I hear there's a guy who knows for a fact that pterodactyls existed in the Civil War.
I'm going to hang you by your toes. The pterodactyl thing. That video of Godless You're just reacting to it is still funny to me. Like
everything about that is great. It's like, huh? I just when I saw that video, I just imagined the meme in the background going, "Everybody asks you if you're okay, but you're not okay."
All right, let's go back to this dude.
And so our young people, they read lots of negative pushback against Christianity, and they read bad internet arguments. And then they get to church and
bad internet arguments. They hear bad internet arguments. I'm sorry, but we know a person who provides a lot of bad ones, and he actually had to get off of Twitter.
Poor Master
say really
Apologist.
nice things to really well-meaning things like,
he's my soulmate. I want him back so bad.
Just have faith. Just believe. And it forms within young people this idea that maybe Christianity isn't robust enough a worldview for me to hang my hat on. Maybe it can't answer these questions.
Did you miss the part where he said "just believe" for science?
What?
Hold on.
Don't go backwards. Don't go backwards. We have so much more ground to cover. All right. Oh, Jesus Christ.
They think that perhaps science has closed the door on God. And I really want to speak to you about this because I've had friends where this has happened.
It hasn't closed the door on God. It's not talking about it because it's off topic.
It's a category error. It's a category error. Science has its category in naturalism. Anything supernatural, so gods, would fly outside of that framework. And you know what? That's fine. It doesn't have to.
Like, when I started really getting into like the veracity of the conversation on religion, there's a reason why I looked at science for a little while in the discussion of evolution and all that stuff, because I thought that was interesting, like Thunderfoot videos and Aaron Raw and all that stuff. That was really cool stuff for me to watch, and it did like reinforce a position that I already had at the time, which was, all right, well, evolution is true, young earth creationism is bullshit. And I thought that as a Christian. The things that got me to start really questioning Christianity wasn't fucking science. It was philosophy. And, you know, this idea that, like, you can have a Christian worldview that is completely coherent with science. There are, you know, like, people with heavy degrees in science that are Christians. I think Cy Gard is one. Is who we've seen around in this community. Like, this is such a frustrating kind of like point for me.
I'm gonna say Hugh Ross is another. Hugh Ross has actually gone toe to toe with Ken Ham on this issue.
Yeah, and like, great. So, but the thing that is a Christianity killer for me was philosophy. So why? Anyway, I could rant on that for quite some time. So
it seems like the hour of video that I got out of this 26-minute long conversation that he had, it seems like you would have gotten about double that.
Yeah, I mean, probably, because I'm annoyed with him like every step of the way. Like,
but I'm passionate about demonstrating for young people that this actually isn't.
Oh, I remember the point that I wanted to fucking make.
Fits really well.
I am so sorry. So anyway, his thing is that, like, you know, science is bad because it's, you know, it holds this naturalistic philosophy, and then you know, we make all these assumptions. The reason why science holds to naturalism as far as the methodology is because that's all it can observe. Everything else is off topic. Everything else is in philosophy. Philosophy is where that discussion is being held. So, you know, the because it's off topic is something that I'm probably going to have to, I'll be hitting the table several times, screaming because it's off topic, you idiot. If you guys get anything out of this video, conversations about God, off topic from science, get it. Like, there's no reason why it should be influencing the classroom from that perspective. Science it's just science and religion. Religion, if anything, is going to be influenced by philosophy. Philosophy influences both religion and science, but they don't mess with each other. They're discussing different things. Unless religion is trying to encroach on science when it makes claims like 6,000-year-old Earth, they shouldn't be fucking with each other. That's when science can fight back really, really strongly. And, you know, religions that make claims against scientific against claims that can be studied through scientific veracity and are incoherent, they're incongruent with that, gonna run into a lot of fucking trouble.
That's one of the reasons why there's an analogy that I've used before. That's that, you know, through philosophy you get science, through science you get engineering, but engineering is not philosophy.
Your voice just went down like 6 octaves.
How about now? Oh, did it do the thing where it gets really deep?
Yeah. Deep throat, Cirrus. Like, suddenly you turned into a 6.5 foot tall man that's been smoking since childhood. It was kind of wonderful.
Is it still that way now?
No, you're better now.
Okay, cool.
That's I remember.
It's done that before. But no, the analogy that I've used before in situations like this is just that philosophy is the groundwork that you get science out of, and science is the groundwork that you get engineering out of. But engineering is not science, and science is not philosophy, and engineering is definitely not philosophy. Yet these things are
counter to philosophy in a lot of cases.
yet it's incontrovertible that this ladder exists. It's like a tree branch. So you have the tree, the philosophy is the tree, and as you go across the branches, they go left, right, in every way. Once you've got science on the right branch, and you've got religion on the left branch, they ought not intersect. They're coming from the same tree, but they are two completely separate things. And yet somehow this happens anyway. Specifically, this happens in about the
sides, I might add. because you get a lot of atheists that say that they need scientific evidence of God or something like that.
Yeah, but you can mostly blame that on 1920s, 1930s, I think, when young Earth creationism got into its starting stride.
You can blame it in the 1800s when it was a conversation too. So anyway, we'll go back to this guy.
Chrismer says that, sirs, you should have kept your mic like that. It sounded like you just inhaled a bunch of sulfur hexafluoride.
Does that make your voice deeper? I don't know.
Yeah, sulfur hexafluoride does the opposite to your voice of what helium does when you inhale it.
All right. I'm not here to talk about science.
Neither is this guy.
With modern scientific discoveries, and it's actually the worldview of naturalism that struggles to adequately explain the universe we find ourselves in. Can I please get someone to get me a cup of water, because my lips are sticking to my teeth? Thanks, Mrs. Walker. I appreciate that.
I left that out of my video too.
Let's just look at Christianity quickly, although I think I'm talking to people that already know what it's about.
Okay, preaching to the choir.
Life questions. God exists and all other things get their existence from him. The universe is created by God for the purpose of supporting living creatures. People are important, they're very important, because they're created in the image of God. And we're not just these biological robots, but we are
Pause
we
it.
have a spiritual side.
He's already fucked up. The man being made in God's image and man being robots are not mutually exclusive. Just ask a Calvinist. Let's continue.
To us as well, an immaterial soul that lives within inside us, and it lives on after our body dies. And about religion, Christianity says that there's one true path, and that's found in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much.
We get to listen to him sensually gulp water.
Great, water's amazing. Now, if we look at these views side by side,
The drink of life.
our common sense should lead us to a conclusion.
You mean milk?
And that's that both of these views can't be true at the same time because they contradict one another. We've got this rule of human thought called the law of non-contradiction, and using that kind of logic, we can understand that it's impossible for God to exist and not exist at the same time. So one of these views has to be false.
I saw the eyes
But
moving
how do we
there.
decide between them? How do we determine which worldview is true? I want to ask you a slightly different question. How do we decide, how do homicide detectives decide between murder suspects? I want you to imagine a scenario. There's a crime scene, and there's two suspects seen in the area at the time of the crime. And so investigators are going to look at that crime scene for clues. They're going to take witness statements. They're going to take fingerprints. They're going to look for artifacts like bits of clothing.
See, this is funny
I'm
to me.
noticing all this stuff is physical. Go ahead.
This is specifically funny to me because Cold Case Christianity is a book that me and a bunch of other YouTubers are actually going through right now.
Yeah, I mean, isn't he? Is he citing Cold Case Christianity?
No, he's just using a lot of the same analogies.
Arguments? Yeah. Okay.
That are
Like
left at the crime scene. They're going to take DNA evidence. And using that information, they're going to put that all together and they're going to decide which suspect best fits the evidence. And I think when we're talking about worldviews, it's a really wise idea if we follow that same process. But where would we look for clues that would point us to either naturalism being true or Christianity being true? And I'm going to read from Psalm 19 because I think it tells us where we might look. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." It's saying, if you want to look somewhere for some clues that a God might have been involved in this universe somehow, look up, because that's where you're going to find it. And when I look up at...
Look at the trees. Look at the trees, Ocean. It's proof of Yahweh.
I think he's doing argument from design. Not argument from design. Argument from beauty? Is that what he's doing? Which one is he doing?
Both of those fall under look at the trees.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But if he's arguing from design, then Fibonacci sequence shits on him. If he's arguing from beauty, then it's subjective and it still shits on him.
Yeah. Like I don't. He lists these things to find at a crime scene, and they're all physical, right? And then he's starting to talk about looking for evidence, and then he goes directly to something that's not physical in order to make his case. Like I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of having like non-physical evidence, but it's not going to be scientific. And if he's going to start criticizing naturalism, like if there's a disconnect here, what's he doing?
His best.
Okay.
But a beautiful night sky like this, I just see beauty. I see like stars. I can point out a few constellations here and there.
Yeah, he's doing beauty.
But scientists, astronomers, when they look at this stuff, they see a whole world of detail, a different kind of beauty. And so today I want to present to you two uncontroversial facts that scientists have discovered about the universe. I want to ask you the question, do they make sense on a naturalistic worldview, or does Christianity actually give a better explanation? And the first fact that we're going to talk about is that
now we're mixing branches again.
Definitely had a beginning.
Yeah.
Alexander Vilenkin, who's a professor of physics from Tufts University, very well respected, he said that all the evidence we have, all of it, says that the universe had a beginning. And when he's talking about evidence, I cut most of it out because I thought it would be too boring, but Einstein's theory of general relativity predicted a beginning to the universe. And we've got also something called the second law of thermodynamics, which is telling us that the universe is kind of like a wind-up toy, and that slowly over time, the amount of usable energy within the universe is being depleted. And if the universe hadn't had a beginning, if it had gone
It also talks a
and
whole
ever
lot
and ever
about
and
entropy,
all
but
that
he just
energy
glazes over that.
used up. Just two ways we know that the universe had a beginning, and there's stacks and stacks and stacks of this.
Yeah, I don't think that.
So the implications.
I guess let's give it a pause and just kind of discuss a little bit about what he's doing. I can see he's in like case building mode right now, where he's trying to bring up all of these things. But I think that the criticisms that we've already levied against him are still standing right now. He wouldn't be addressing any of the things that we've said. I didn't predict that he would, but he's just kind of falling into the same trap of like he's mixing the branches. He's not talking about a philosophical problem. He's talking about it. He's trying to criticize science with religion. Where's like he's not, I don't think he's making his case so far. He's just said things are pretty. And let's talk about that science says that there is a beginning of the universe. Let's say the science does say that there's a beginning of the universe. I think that there's a fun conversation to be had there, but let's just give him, all right, there's a beginning to the universe.
So what? At that point, it doesn't get you to any particular god. Like science, there's a beginning of the universe. Therefore, Odin. Okay.
Well, it would might be like chaos, or it could be that there's evidence for the world tree. It could be argument for new. It could be an argument for a naturalistic understanding, to say that there's something else that started the universe, but it wasn't a god at all. There's all kinds of ways you can go with it. So, like, we can grant him everything from here, but I don't see where he's going to actually build into a salient point.
Yeah, see what's going to... I believe the way that I worded it in my video was that this is the same thing conspiracy theorists do when they grab 50,000 points from every idea and practice and then try to like shove them together into one cohesive narrative. Mm-hmm. And you can make all of this consistent with a version of Christianity and be like reasonable. Mm-hmm. Except for the exclusionary principle that he's trying to put forward.
Right. Yeah. If he tries to say, well, this means Christianity, that's when we're going to get into a lot of issues. But he can argue theism from here, and he can say, well, Christianity is consistent with this, and put forward a version.
Well, of course, Christianity is consistent with theism. It is a form of theism. That's nothing special.
Christianity can be consistent with a scientific worldview. That can work. You can do that.
Yeah, you just take the parts of the Old Testament that conflict with science, make sure that they're what's up?
If you take them out.
Yeah, take them, call them metaphor, or
or you
say
could
that the authors were misinformed. Say that the
Right.
original authors were misinformed, and
That's another
then
thing.
boom.
The Bible reveals spiritual truth rather than literal truth in all cases, and you're fine. You can still have a Christian spirituality. You can still believe in a salvation deity, and that salvation deity can still be Jesus Christ. It doesn't mean, like, like you don't need to do all this hoop jumping to. You can use methodological naturalism for science still, as that from that perspective. There's no problem there.
Well, he would say there's a problem there.
Of course he would.
He's trying to lay out all the problems with that. You're basically saying that, well, science can't account for this. Well, science doesn't try to account for everything. It tries to account for what it can. So
Is that what he's going to do? Is just going to say science doesn't account for the beginning of the universe, therefore God? Is that his ultimate?
I reveal no spoilers.
Oh my God!
For us is that any true worldview, any worldview that's true and worth believing in, has to account for a beginning of the universe.
I told you I wouldn't give you any spoilers, but there it was. It took all of 5 more seconds. I think I've killed my co-host.
Go back 10 seconds. I want to hear that again. Press that little back 10 seconds button.
For us is that any true worldview, any worldview that's true and worth believing in, has to account for a beginning of the universe. It needs to supply a mechanism or a cause for that beginning, and it's a beginning from nothing. And we're going to address that question now. Why nothing?
Oh no. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I've seen Christians do this. I shouldn't have been surprised. All right.
Okay,
So
now I have a question for you. In science, generally speaking, how many definitions of nothing are there?
there's the problem. I think there's a bunch, aren't there?
There's quite a few versus philosophical nothing, which is absence of all.
Absence of everything, yeah. But and there's going to be a lot of equivocation on that, isn't there? But I don't. Oh man, this is all right. This is like a thing. You're not going to be able to conclude from this that therefore God exists, because there's a proposition that the universe came from nothing in a scientific sense. There's just there's so much that's wrong here. Okay, let's continue. Let's see what he's actually doing before I jump on him.
I apologize in advance.
So, if you can follow my terrible, terrible diagrams, this is the first moment of time.
I like your
the
terrible,
absolute
terrible
first moment.
dialogue.
It's the first moment where time and space and matter and energy all begin to exist.
I have to already point out that there are scientific models that don't say that time, space, and matter and energy all have to exist at the same time. Certainly, matter and energy existing before, well, anything before t equals 0 is nonsense. It's the whole concept of it.
Yeah.
But the idea, well, time is a measurement of change, and if you have matter that has no change
Then there's no time.
Over infinity, there's no time until there's change. Change is the Big Bang. That's when t equals 0. So you have time coming into existence while matter and energy were already there, because matter is the physical, energy is just the potentiality.
And this is where philosophy comes in and says, well, if you're going to have an actor of change, then maybe it was an outside agent.
Exactly.
But
that's not these things
not
coming
a scientific claim.
And that's not these things coming into existence at the exact same time either.
Right. And then I'm going to assume this guy's not an open theist, because he's not going to say that God is constrained by time.
And they exist right along this timeline here. But I want to ask you a question, and the question is...
We have several questions.
What is there?
Oh, gods. All right, here we go.
The answer is nothing. There's nothing there. Because there's no time, there's no matter, there's no things to be made out of, there's no space, and there's no energy. They don't exist. There's just nothing. And when we say nothing, we use it as a universal term of negation. We mean not anything.
It's a philosophical
no
nothing, but he's talking about science.
No potential, no possibility that a universe can spring out of it by itself.
Yeah, he's going
But we
with
also know that everything that
Kalam,
happens requires a cause. The universe is an effect.
Here it is.
Doesn't Kalam like entail that a theory of time has to be true?
There's not a single example of anything that begins to exist like the universe did.
I think Kalam is
without being
restrained
forced
by
to
a
exist by
theory of
something
time.
else. So we have to have
So
something
pause it. We can discuss that.
causally prior.
So, I think it does require an A theory of time. You can refit it for B theory. But I think, God, that still requires kind of an A theory understanding, doesn't it? Kalam gets really wonky under B theory of time.
Yeah, as far as in any conversation I've had about Kalam, it's always been under a theory.
I think that would be a good question for somebody who's like, you get Ozymandias on it or something like that, or even Steve. Like, how could the Kalam be interpreted under a B theory approach?
Well, especially considering
I
there's
don't know, honestly.
Yeah, there's also different variants to A theory as well, apparently.
Yeah.
And I'm not terribly well versed in them.
Here's an issue that he's not going to address, but here's an issue that's with what's on the screen right now. That if he has something that is, this little dot here is the beginning of time, and then he has this cause placed before time, unless he is supposing a time B of being outside of time, not B theory of time, but like an alternate time, then God existing outside of time means that he cannot change, means that he cannot make action, which means he cannot be the cause.
In fact, actually, there was well, yeah, because if he exists outside of time and time is a measurement of change, then God can't change. There's
Right.
no...
God can't have temporal states, therefore God can't be the cause of the beginning of the universe. So that's one that Christians need to contend with, because it creates a big problem for them, because they don't want to constrain God to even like a secondary time unless they're an open theist. And that creates a big problem. So he's not going to address that because that's not what he's thinking about. But he's just going to say there's a cause. But when we're looking at that, if everything that he's going to talk about as far as there being a cause that is outside of time, he's not going to propose a solution from this. And that undercuts everything that he's going to say after this.
Well, let's see if you're right. I don't want to disappoint.
To the universe, something that's able to bring time and space and matter and energy into existence. So what does naturalism have to say by way of explanation for how this could occur? Isaac Asimov, famous science fiction writer but also a professional biochemist, he said, it was the interaction of positive and negative energy that caused the universe to exist. That's one opinion. Here's another one. Stephen Hawking. He says it was the law of gravity that was the cause that brought the universe into existence. And Lawrence Krauss, who's a physicist, who's probably the most active scientist working on this problem, how you could get a universe from nothing. He says that it's virtual particles that are the cause of the universe. And firstly, I want you to notice, see how none of them agree on what the beginning of the universe
I knew he was going to do
None of
that.
them agree. That's because
None of them agree. Therefore, the one that has the most people that agree is true. And I can see that he's counting a lot of noses there. In fact, I believe that's the name of that fallacy.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I knew that he was going to be going, okay, well, these people disagree, therefore all of them are wrong, which I'm not sure what the name of that fallacy is, but that's definitely bad logic.
I know that there's a...
Well, if you have a group of disagreements, then because there's disagreements, then they're all incorrect. That's just not... That seems to be like a non sequitur. It doesn't follow there.
No, now you can say that they could all be wrong. You can say that they can't all be right, but they could all be wrong.
Yeah, they can't all be right. Fine. I mean, maybe you can come up with a... I'm not well versed on any of those topics, so maybe you could come up with an explanation in which they could all be right. Like,
Well,
I'm not a scientist, so... and even if I was a scientist, I'm not on the level of any of those guys. So,
Well, and if you understood quantum theory, then you wouldn't understand quantum theory.
so saith Feynman. But yeah, Okay. What he's saying doesn't follow here. So, or he hasn't said that yet, though. He said, "Notice they all disagree." So I guess let's see
Because
what
there
he's going to
is no
say.
consensus from a scientific standpoint about what brought the universe into existence.
Oh, that's correct.
But they all have another common problem. They all share this problem together, these explanations. None of them have the universe coming from actually nothing.
Right. Okay. Now he's equivocating on the scientific understanding versus the philosophical nothing. So okay,
Yeah, because Lawrence Krauss gives no less than 8 definitions for nothing, I believe, from the scientific standpoint. And in one of those definitions of nothing, also known as a vacuum, you have quantum particles popping into existence all the time. But those are all scientific understandings of nothing. That's not a philosophical definition of nothing. If he's going to use a philosophical definition of nothing, then he needs to be talking about philosophers and issues that he might have with them. But instead, he's using a philosophical version of nothing, which exists not on the branch of science, but at the base, and he's trying to use that as his justification for holding issue, which is wrong.
yeah.
It's
I don't know.
That's like trying to use philosophy to parse out and say that, no, well, evolution is definitely not true because X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, hold on. If you're using a different methodology, there we go, words. If you're using a different methodology than science is using that has worked, then please show me that your mechanism is working to the same degree and came to a different conclusion. And if it isn't, then maybe you should use their method, not yours.
Well, then they start quoting scripture at you.
Not necessarily. I've dealt with atheists who have this position as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I personally know a few. So they won't quote scripture. They'll just say that they got some of these things wrong, or they'll bring up something that's not even tangentially related and say, well, evolution doesn't account for this.
Are you talking about people that bring up like Fedor's objection?
No, nothing anywhere near as refined as that.
Okay.
Usually saying, well, what about these people here who had like heads shaped kind of like cones? How does evolution account for that? And like, well, it doesn't have to, especially if you've got people who are wearing jewelry or helmets from birth that literally shape their heads like that because that's what's in fashion, just like having small ankles in China being in fashion, crippling people. We know it happens today, and we know it's happened over time. You don't have to have evolution accounting for that. You just have to have human stupidity.
The funny thing is, the small feet thing became like such a big deal in China that you had people that couldn't walk. That's just anyway.
Yeah, that's
culture
why
is fun.
That's why I
so
said
yeah,
all you need for any of that is just humans being stupid, and we've got that in abundance. Don't worry.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's jump back in.
Asimov has energy causing energy to exist. But how can energy exist before that first moment of time, which is when energy first begins to exist? Can you see the problem? It doesn't work. Stephen Hawking has gravity. But gravity only works if you already have matter for it to act on. Gravity is the force of attraction between two bodies with mass. You need matter for gravity to work. This doesn't work either. Krauss's example is really interesting. He says empty space is a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles popping in and out of existence. If you wait long enough, that kind of nothing will always produce particles. But the problem is he's got space. Empty space is space. And if you wait long enough, it means you've got time. And if you've got space and time, then that kind of nothing is actually just something. Naturalists always have to import features from something into their definition of nothing to be able to explain the origin of the universe.
Except they're not importing features, they're going off of what's observable.
I'm not quite sure, like, his criticism kind of works there. What's the problem that you're finding with that one? I actually kind of like what he said there.
The problem that I'm finding with that one is that, for one, again, Krauss has multiple definitions of nothing in his book, and he could reference any one and just grab the one that he has the best argument against and strictly use that one. My
issue is if you wait long enough. That's the one that actually resonated with me.
Well, because if you wait long enough, that requires time.
Right.
Because long enough, T has to equal 0 to begin with.
And this guy's using that as a criticism against Krauss. So is there Do you agree with that criticism, or is that like
I'd say that
this? I don't know if is he even talking about the beginning of the universe with this quote?
with this quote, he's not talking about the beginning of the universe. He's talking about quantum particles in a vacuum.
Okay, well then, he's being quote mined here. That's the problem with
exactly what he's doing. He's being quote
Okay.
mined. Also, in just a second, apparently. You okay? Our door has this horrible issue where the doorknob sticks and it doesn't like to do anything that it's supposed to do. You know, like operating functionally as a door. So, so every now and again, it requires a hand on both sides to get it to even fucking work. Which is great. Apartments are wonderful, guys. Your repairmen, they will come on time. Trust us.
I feel that. All right, let's go ahead.
But again,
Yeah, so
he's
just quote mining here, so
he's just quote mining at this point. From what I understand about that particular part in Krauss's book, is he's just saying that, you know, here's an example of nothing where nothing is, and yet things do happen to be. And he just uses that as an example to say, you know, saying that something can't come from nothing is a bit nonsensical because we actually observe that all the time. But he's not using that as an example for the beginning of the universe. He's just using it for the one claim that something can't come from nothing.
right, he's making and great, we can make a discussion out of that. And that since the universe works in this wonky way on that level, it definitely opens up the possibilities for discussion of an automatic beginning of the universe. That's fine. I think that's a point to Lawrence Krauss's favor. Why? The quote mining I get really frustrated with that.
There's a reason why I don't. If you've noticed in my videos, I'll very rarely pull quotes from other people for almost anything, and it's because of this. I don't want to accidentally quote mine.
Right. I mean, sometimes you can check with the person to make sure, but with somebody like Lawrence Krauss, you're not going to be able to do that.
No.
What we really need is a cause for the universe, for the beginning of the universe, that isn't reliant on time or space or matter or energy already existing. So how does Christianity go? Where would you look, by the way, if you wanted to find out about what Christianity has to say about the beginning of the universe? Oh, goodness, you're all whispering. Of course, it's Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning.
But certainly don't go to the other Genesis account that also talks about creation. That would be bad. Don't do that.
Well, I mean, it's the first one, fine. But, I've noticed, and here's where I knew it would happen. Here's where he's doing what I said he was going to do. He jumped straight into Christianity.
Ignoring every other creation mythos.
The open theism guy did this to me too, where he started saying that like none of the pagan gods are creator entities.
But there are creator entities within polytheism.
A bunch of them. Yeah. So, if you're going to explain the universe through your creator entity, this is an explanation that can work for any creator entity now. Like, even if I give him everything up until this point, I don't think I do, but let's say that I do. At this point, he still has a problem. He's got a big one, which is all that's required here is a creator. And there's a bunch of those that have been put forward.
I mean, Brahma, Daksha, you've got El, who's also in the Judea mythos.
Did you bring up a list? Did you do that?
I'm looking at a list right now and finding the ones that I see as familiar.
Yeah.
Yahweh's on this list.
Is Nu on this list? There should be Nu. There should be Chaos. Odin is creator of the earth. And then you might have the Yggdrasil.
Yeah, Noom is on here. Odin is on here. Krishna is on here. Jesus is on here. You've got it's the very, very long. You've also got God on here. God. Just God. Just
I guess
God.
that's deistic. So.
Well, also you have Islam and Christianity that both claim that God, just named God, is in fact the deity as well. There's some people that'll just be like, the name's not Jehovah, the name's not Yahweh, it's God. Like, oh, okay. Well, what does Allah mean? God. Oh, okay, sure. Fine, just call it God, whatever.
God created the heavens and the earth.
See, even he agrees.
In the beginning, or at the first moment of time, God, the cause, created the heavens and the earth, the universe, time, space, matter, and energy. It begins to exist. So Genesis, which on naturalism is pre-scientific mythology, it nails the truth about the beginning of the universe 3,500 years before science finally arrives at the same conclusion, that the universe had a definite beginning.
So, so the issue that I brought up here when it came to this was, so how many options are there really here? There's two. Either the universe had a beginning or it didn't. You'd have to get into some really wonky theories of time to have any option besides those two. So you've got a coin flip. And because the Bible got a coin flip that had a 50% chance of being correct, the entire thing must be true. No. I disagree.
That's a good point. Like, I don't think that you can walk away with this with any certainty. He's not doing well here so far, so let's keep going.
Man bun apologetics. Make it a new hashtag.
Hashtag man bun apologetics.
Dr. Robert Jastrow, who at one time was the chairman of NASA's Lunar Exploration Committee, he said, for the scientist who's lived by his...
By the way, another fallacy that's happening here is he's basically just using an argument from authority, but he's using it as the other side has an argument from authority, but that's not the case.
By his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He's scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. Can you feel his disappointment? Okay, and is that just a coincidence? Did the Bible just get it lucky?
Just given your description.
What's up?
Like, this is kind of a weird thing. I don't know what this guy's point that what he was trying to say with that, because, like, even if we propose a creator entity, and let's say that there is a creator entity for a minute, but this statement doesn't really provide very much. The journey of the scientist in figuring out the beginning of the universe and the journey of the theologian trying to figure out the beginning of the universe, even if we suppose there's a creator entity, are still asking two different questions.
Correct.
So,
because science would mainly be asking, by what mechanism did this come about?
Right.
Even if there is a creator entity, you still have the question of by what mechanism did they use?
Right.
There, you have two completely different questions being asked, whereas the theologian will go, well, God did it, and that would be where they sit in some cases. There's some theologians that might pursue question past that point. But generally speaking, the idea that, well, God brought it into being through their own power, that could be an answer that is sufficient for a theologian. But when you've got a scientist that go, okay, well, you said power. There's a lot of different ideas behind power that we have. Can we please explore this a little further? How did you do it? How did you solve the infinite energy problem? Like, you're going to have a lot of issues that the scientist is going to bring up that are outside of the theologian's ballpark, and they're going to be going on two different journeys. It's like having, even in this analogy, it's like the scientist taking the way up a path, and the path has rocks, the path has stones, the path has a lot of things in his way, and he's overcoming all of these, and the theologians took an elevator.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scientist path at that point, like, if you look at it that way, the scientist path is going to be more rewarding. I think that you can have, I don't even think they're climbing necessarily the same mountain until they meet in a spot where science runs into questions of God.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, maybe they've climbed the same mountain, but it was from different sides.
And then there's 1,000 hills.
Very different paths. I'm not going to, like if you really look at spirituality and you really look at science, they both deal with very difficult questions, and they both deal with very difficult, like, processes. But the scientific journey is going to be just one that is completely different and asking completely different questions once it gets to this, like, mountain peak, at which point you reach a creator God. The theologian, or the person who's having a spiritual journey, is going through their own little thing. They're climbing up a side of the mountain that may be more challenging, maybe less challenging, depending on what spiritual subjects that they're dealing with. There's a lot of hard questions in spirituality that are usually answered through philosophical thought, even spiritual experience. But then you reach to the top and you have this discussion about the creator entity. They're still asking different questions about that subject.
Well,
you might be standing on the same peak, but you're standing on two different parts of it at that point still.
And it's completely
You're asking
ignoring
about
the fact.
character of that entity rather than the methodology of that entity.
And it's ignoring all of the thousands of little hills that are outside of that mountain, where both different strands, different realms of science have failed and different theologies have failed. Because if it turns out that this band of theologians, they happen to be Christian theologians, then you've got all these polytheists everywhere who are on hills that they've climbed, but they're not as high as the mountain, or vice versa. You've got a polytheist on top, and you've got a bunch of Christians that are on all these mountains everywhere, and or all these hills everywhere. They climbed a hill, but they didn't get as high because their answer was incorrect. And
We're
then
expanding the shit out of this metaphor.
and then on the back of science, you've got like alchemy that's just sitting there like in a puddle. Sorry, I wanted desperately to get to the alchemy part.
So I don't know, like the when the theologian gets to the top of this mountain and discusses the creator entity, then they're going to be asking about, okay, so this is the entity that created hell. Let's talk about the character of this entity. When the scientist reaches the top of it, it's going to be asking, all right, this is the thing that created the universe. How? How did you do that? What was the mechanism?
He's not going to be asking questions
How did you
of
influence
ethics.
with the physical? What's the where did that all fit in? And those are questions that if a scientist is able to get answers to, they're going to fucking love it. Whereas the theologian, those questions aren't necessarily super interesting.
No, but the ethical ones are definitely going to cause a lot of them. There are going to be a lot of implications to the ethics of this entity.
Right. And then from that perspective, it might be interesting. But then there's still questions of like the afterlife question is going to be a big one for assuming that the creator has to do with the afterlife as well. That's going to be a series of questions from the theologian once they get there. And that doesn't have anything to do with the beginning of the universe. So,
or you just have
or they might be asking, why did you create the universe?
Or you have a God who's sitting there going, afterlife? Never even fucking thought about that.
That's a good idea, isn't it?
He's like, I am the only infinite being. Shit, it's lonely here.
Oh, man. Man, I wish I'd thought of that. Why didn't you guys say anything?
And then you're like, well, we've been saying it. And he goes, yeah, but I'm a deistic God, so I didn't listen.
I didn't hear. I'm blaming you. Anyway, let's continue.
To produce that universe effect, it says, God created the universe. But I can hear an objection.
I hear
I've
the
never
audience.
heard one in that form before, though. Objection by sneezing. Okay, and the objection is not a sneeze, it is that God is not nothing. How come you can have God as a pre-existing first cause of the universe, but you can't have pre-existing gravity or energies or virtual particles? And that's because natural explanations require part of nature to already exist in order to produce nature. What we need is an explanation outside of nature, something that transcends the physical universe.
Cool. Now, how does that get us to Christianity?
Supernatural. And if we think carefully about what God is like, we realize that he perfectly fits the profile that we're looking for. Firstly, we need a cause of the universe that's not made out of physical stuff, because that stuff only begins to exist at the first moment of time. And in John chapter 4, verse 24, Jesus says, God's spirit, he's spirit. He's not made out of atoms and molecules. He doesn't have a physical body. He's not a man in the sky with a...
So then this naturally begs the question, what is spirit?
Well, okay. So I was actually thinking about Cicero when this gets stated, because the polytheist polytheist thought is heavily inspired by Cicero and his compilation of the Greek philosophy conversations. And in his text on the nature of the gods, he says that it doesn't make sense to suppose that the gods are made of atoms. And he means a similar thing that in the scientific sense when he says atoms, and that he's talking about atoms from the Greek philosophy, which would be the building blocks of the universe. The reason why we call atoms atoms is because the Greeks figured that there was something like that.
Yeah, they posited that it was those, and then we found out that atoms were made up of quarks, and then we went, oops.
Right. And the Greeks thought that atoms were like, there was a point where everything is the same thing. There's one thing that everything is made out of, and that would be an atom. And they didn't suppose something like different kinds of atoms, like we actually have, but they're mean the same thing. So Cicero says it doesn't make sense for the gods to be made out of atoms. He even calls it absurd. So polytheist entities fall under this category so far. He hasn't made a distinction as of yet. So he's still arguing for Christianity.
Yeah, and
I have cited a polytheist that so far this works. What's his argument against it?
Nope. And that's where you end up having issues, because when you've got something, I think this is what I cover in part 2, not in part 1. I believe, I could be wrong, I made it like a day or two ago, my memory's horrible, but I believe when I did that part of the episode, said that the issue with saying something is spirit is you can't say what spirit is or isn't. It becomes vacuous and vapid, and there's no... You could use it to define anything at that point, which is a point that you're trying to get to as well, because saying that God is spirit, okay, well, the polytheistic gods are also spirit in this, by this nomenclature.
I'm not saying they're spirit. I'm saying they're immaterial. They're not
true.
atoms. So if, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like, well, spirit, because I don't know, I agree with you. There's not necessarily a great definition for spirit in this context, because so far the only thing that he said is there's natural and supernatural. And then spirit, he's going to put into supernatural, but there's no definition of it beyond that. It's like the word ethereal that when used in Paradise Lost, a discussion of the angels being made out of ethereal, this material that is not material. That's what it is. John Milton, man. But there's that whole thing that this immaterial material is what the gods are, or what the angels are made out of, and this is essentially what he's saying here. It's a spirit is this thing. I don't necessarily have a problem with him doing that, because you can use it as a logical posit and then move forward as being, this is the immaterial substance, as strange as that sounds, that God is made out of. Great. Okay. Well, how is that distinct from anything else
that actually
falls in this category?
Brings up something Purple Rhymes with Orange said in the chat. By the way, I said it in the chat, and I'm going to say it again here. Thank you for mailing me the rice cooker purple. That was awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool.
Yeah, we're going to be, me and Pam are going to be moving into our own place.
Cheese.
What?
Steamed veggies and cheese.
Oh, yeah. But no, me and Pam are going to be moving into a house here in about 5 or 6 months. And so the shared utensils and shared different things that we have here in the house. I'm trying to remember what appliances. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Appliances. The shared appliances we have in the house are going to be split between who bought the appliances originally. And one of the appliances that we use all the time that was bought by the roommate is a rice cooker that we use all the time. So very thankful for that. But he points out in the chat.
I had a roommate that left and took the rice cooker with him because he bought it, and I was mad at him. Not really, but
it's so much easier to cook rice in one of those than it is in a pot.
Oh, gods, yes, so much.
But Purple Rhymes with Orange says he spent 25 years exploring various pagan paths, so he loves to hear Christians try to explain what's unique about their religion.
Yeah.
Which is, I agree with that here, is that you've got a definition that's a giant umbrella term that so many things fall in, but you're saying that yours is the only one that falls in it.
Right, and the thing is that there isn't a distinction between the things that are proposed. Ethereal and spirit. I don't know what the difference between the two of them are. There isn't they kind of mean the same thing. I think they're intended to mean the same thing.
And if somebody tried to
material,
if somebody tries to posit that there is a difference between the two, any differences that they posit will be arbitrary by nature.
Well, I mean, you can try and make some. The problem with it is that maybe there are a bunch of these immaterial materials. Maybe that's a thing, but the problem with that is we don't have access to what any of those materials are or what any of their properties are. So to try and divide them up and discuss them is going to be
a little fruitless.
It's gonna you wind up building out of arbitrary boundaries that you don't have any evidence or reason to start building these boundaries.
Exactly.
So what are you doing? I don't know.
Again, like I said last time, what he's doing is his best.
Right. Well, I mean, like let's say, give an example. Maybe Thor and Mjolnir are made out of different things, but they're both immaterial.
There's obviously a distinction
People
there,
say that there's a distinction,
but there's no way to explore that distinction.
Right.
Unless the distinction's explained to you by the gods at that point.
Right. I mean, the only distinction that I could see is like one is that which you make a hammer out of, and the other is of what God is made out of.
Well, by that brings
that,
you.
I don't know.
But by that brings you back to atoms. Atoms are that which humans are made out of, and quarks eventually are that which you make a hammer out of. But hammers are made out of atoms, and so are humans.
But Mjolnir would be a non-physical. So, you get like there's a lot of fun things to kind of play with that, and it could be an interesting conversation. But he's not going to do it.
No, this is what's happening here. Is this is
God is spirit, and spirit is a catch-all for everything that isn't captured by science, and then he's going to be using it as an ad hoc explanation for the beginning of the universe. Fine, if you want to believe that on the basis of logical consistency, you can try and get away with it, but you're not going to be able to say that you have this position with any certainty. You're not going to be able to say that this is something that you should believe.
And I'd say that when you're dealing with something like this, what we're dealing with here, would you agree, is very surface level apologetics.
Yeah, of course.
None of this is inherently
He's not
deep.
being robust here.
No.
So, yeah.
He's delivering to a lay audience either what he knows to the best of his ability or what he expects the lay audience will understand.
Right.
Long white beard. He exists wholly apart from physical materials. So we don't have the absurdity in our explanation of matter existing before matter exists. And because he's not made of anything physical, God doesn't take up any physical space or have a geographic location. He doesn't require space to already exist before space exists either. And in physics, time is always linked to the existence of space. We've heard of the concept maybe of space-time. Well, God doesn't have any physical dimensions in space, so he doesn't have temporal coordinates that describe where he is in time. He exists independently of time. So we have an explanation of the beginning of the universe that isn't reliant on time or space or material or any other natural things in order to exist.
I have a problem with this. I know you're probably pausing because you're about to say something, but I'm going to stop you. He's trying to say that God already had this description. When, we do have, you'd have to try kind of interpret the biblical understanding of God in a way that's a little bit different than what's described. And this is a problem that I think that a lot of religions have. But when you're going to be holding to an inerrant word of God, and especially if you're going to be doing a literal interpretation, God speaks to people, God moves things around, God's hands do things, God's face does things. He makes physical things happen and interacts with people physically. So what's the case for this idea that God doesn't have any of these attributes? I don't know. You're muted.
The best way that I've ever seen this explained is that, man explains things in a way where they can be compared to other things. This is how we compare things. The only reason you know what the color red looks like is because
the Bible is the perfect word of God, Cyrus.
Exactly. That's where the idea.
That's where the disagreement is.
I know. I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah. This is a problem for Christians, and polytheists don't have this issue. But because you can say that about the Eddas. Can you say that about Christianity? I don't know. This is supposed to be a perfect book that gives you a complete understanding. Why doesn't it give you a complete understanding if it's supposed to be a perfect book that gives you complete?
And I think that gets you into a conversation that I've had several times where somebody says, "Well, just because the book is old doesn't mean that it doesn't have value." and then they'll say like, just because the works of Shakespeare can't be 100% attributed to William Shakespeare himself, does that mean that the books are no less useful? And I'm like, well, yes, you're right. That doesn't say that the works of Shakespeare are any less useful. That doesn't say that the works of Shakespeare are any less wonderful works. However, they don't claim to be perfect. They
Right.
are not constrained by the same logical bind that your book is.
Yeah, that's the reason why the polytheist doesn't have to make this issue. The polytheists can use the explanation they're giving, that these are a human understanding of these incredible things. With the Bible, if you hold to that kind of interpretation of the Bible, you're no longer holding that it's an inerrant and perfect text. You're holding that it's human understanding of experiences, which is a very different thing than what Christians are usually claiming. So,
It's sad
Right.
when you can get 2 hours of conversation out of 26 minutes of video.
I know. I knew it was going to happen. So,
So we haven't made any of the same mistakes that naturalists make.
They're not mistakes. You're the one making category errors. Anyway.
yeah.
God also is the kind of thing that would have the power to cause an effect. The power to create everything from nothing, that's maximal power. I can't actually imagine a greater demonstration of power than to craft each and every particle and atom and molecule completely from scratch out of nothing.
Here's a way.
Nothingness has no potential. It can't cause a universe to exist.
Are you about to
God's
fart?
power has infinite potential.
No,
so he
I'm
can.
about to. I want to go after him. He's saying that.
And the last thing is that
Pause
God's
it,
spirit
pause
is
it.
something like an
I'm getting there.
All right. He says that he can't imagine a greater use of power than creating every single article or every single particle. What about creating twice as many? Like, unless he's positing that the universe is also infinite. Which
What
I
about
think-
creating another god? What's more power? What is a better demonstration of power than creating a universe? Creating another being with equal
That's even better.
capacity to
That's
create a
even better.
universe.
I like that one.
Just
Yep.
because,
All right, cool.
Just because
done with
you
that.
can't imagine it doesn't mean somebody else can.
Right.
unembodied mind. He has infinite knowledge and therefore the capacity to design a universe.
Infinite knowledge gets you into the problem of ethics really quick.
Yeah, it does. But what he's trying to say is that because it has a disembodied mind, therefore it's infinite knowledge.
But
if
that
he's
doesn't
talking about
follow,
disembodied-
though.
If he calls it disembodied mind, he's talking about every single polytheistic entity. And not only that, he's also talking about all of the angels and demons and Satan himself within his worldview.
All
all
of
of
these
those
fit the definition of
disembodied
God
minds.
now.
Right. Like, except
And
that they're
because
not
he's got a mind,
creators.
he's got a will, he can choose
But
to
no,
create
they're all omniscient now because they have disembodied minds.
Well, Satan created evil.
Omniscient.
Satan created evil.
What? Okay, well, like, God says he created evil in Isaiah, so,
But see, God is all good. He can't create evil. That was us. It was man.
well, now the Bible just exploded. Let's get back to it.
So when we think about what God is, we find out that he has exactly the properties that are consistent with a first cause of the universe. And the God explanation only becomes more and more likely as we investigate another feature of the universe that science has absolutely discovered, and that is that the universe is perfectly fine-tuned for life. We all know the story of Goldilocks, how she preferred porridge that was not too hot, not too cold, a bed that wasn't too hard or too soft. Well, we happen to find ourselves in a universe that's just right for life to exist when on the basis of probability, it shouldn't actually be that way.
That's not what it is. There happens to be a donut around a giant ball of fire that it's possible for humans to exist on. And inside that donut is the Earth. And that same donut exists around every single other star, and yet, we don't have humans all over the universe, nor do we really have much life in the universe, nor does that donut really exist in very many places in the universe. Like, when you look at it, if you look at the universe in its entirety, stars, despite being a common occurrence, are still kind of a rare occurrence.
And when you compare stars versus the amount of space that exists between the stars,
Right,
there's certainly
suddenly
much
they're
more
really rare.
space. what I find interesting about this, and it's when he says that we have a universe that's just right for life, we have a universe that was designed to beget life. I think the analogy that I use in my video, because this is all in part 2, is then this has got to be the least efficient engine of all time. A decent gasoline engine, like a decent or mediocre one, is gonna be 20-30% efficient on gas. It's gonna have about that much energy efficiency
max or something like that.
Yeah, the energy efficiency is not great, but in terms of other gas engines, that's about what you've got to work with. By this, the universe is perfectly fine-tuned for life because it is 0.000 repeating until you get to the one way down at the end percent efficient at creating life.
The bad engine.
This is a horrible engine.
I like that point.
It's one of the worst engines you could possibly build. Imagine an engine that took...
He's doing this as this Goldilocks is, it's just right. I mean, I've thought before, like, wouldn't it be so much cooler if we had, 17 times more Earth to explore? If there was 20 other continents to sail to and discover.
And you know what? Mathematically, that could work.
Neat?
Mathematically, that could work too, because there's a good 32% yield in our Goldilocks zone that we can be in.
I mean,
you can have a larger Earth.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a large... Gravity gets fucked up, though, and humans existing on it and all that crap. But
it sounds like a good thing, though.
If you had an Earth that was the size of Jupiter, we wouldn't be able to walk on it. Fine. But you could just fuck with the laws of gravity. You have a God that's creating a perfect universe. You can just fuck with the laws of gravity to the point where you can have such a existence where there's an Earth that exists that you can walk around on.
Well, not to mention, when you've got a planet like that, remember that the planet isn't fine-tuned for you, you are fine-tuned for the planet. So whatever life originated on that planet would be able to walk by necessity. It would evolve on that planet.
There might be problems with, I don't know. I think there's physical problems with having a rocky planet the size of Jupiter, but that's neither here nor there. Let's say that there's if you can imagine a universe that allows for a planet that is the size of Jupiter that lets us walk around on it, and we have all this fucking world to explore. That would be, I mean, compared to the size of the universe, that's still really fucking small as far as our areas to explore.
But compared to Jupiter,
things would be so much more fucking cool.
compared to Jupiter, based on size and scale, the Earth is a prison.
Yeah.
With very limited scope for travel.
Right. So, I don't know. There's so much more really interesting things that you could do with much larger Earth. So to suggest that this Earth is perfect or that this Earth is just right, really at this point, we're reaching discussions of carrying capacity on the planet.
Not to mention, if this Earth
is I don't know why you're applying that.
And again, if this Earth is the best that your God could produce, that is an insult to your God at this point.
We walk around. There's a couple of things that I think are really funny. It's we are land-based animals. Great. The Earth is 75% water. Oh, well, we drink water, put salt in it.
Most of it's not drinkable.
Right. It is a Earth that is covered in water that we can't stand on, and it's water that we can't drink. This is perfect? I don't know about that. I can imagine a better Earth. It's there's so many problems with the idea that this is a Goldilocks existence for mankind.
Not going to go into any detail here, but there are 3 layers of this fine-tuning. There are heaps of examples of what we call local fine-tuning within our solar system. For example, one simple one. The Earth is the right distance from the sun so that we can have liquid water. Too far away and the water freezes over, we can't use it. Too close and it all boils away. We've got no usable water. Tragic for life, wouldn't work. We've got what's called galactic fine-tuning. And that's where we find that our solar system happens to be in just about the best spot it possibly could be within our galaxy. It's away from the centre. The centre's bad. There's black holes in there. They emit
You're
I hear an
muted.
objection.
I think that there's a lot of galaxy that's not the center of the galaxy.
Lots of radiation and they tear stars and things apart. We don't want to be there. But we're also close enough to the center where we get the heavy elements that whole process creates. And that's what planets are formed out of. We're close enough to get the good stuff of the planets, far enough away from the bad stuff to be able to survive. We're in a prime location within our galaxy to support life. But the most extreme examples of fine-tuning are found in the fundamental physics and the laws which govern the universe. I'm just going to give you one example of this, but there's lots. I want you to imagine that this dial controls the force strength of gravity everywhere it operates throughout the universe. And the thing is, there's only one setting on this whole dial that's going to allow a life-permitting universe to form.
Yeah, we're getting into fine-tuning argument.
Any other setting you choose is going to completely rule out the possibility of there being living things in the universe. So be careful where you set it.
Is this stuff in cold
And
case?
there's another problem. See these
I think that the fine-tuning argument is glazed over a bit in Cold Case, but it might be somebody else's paragraphs that they found. I know that it's not a focus in Cold Case Christianity, though.
Okay. I know that it's a Lee Strobel book that goes into this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Strobel's not a scientist; he's a lawyer, but he does go into this pretty hardcore in his book. I can't remember if it's Case for Christ or Case for God or whatever, but he does. He's a lawyer, so all of his books are the case for, and then he goes through the evidence like a lawyer would on the issue. And this is like one of his favorite things is the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah, that's the Case for Christ.
Okay.
Is the one you're speaking of, I believe. Yeah, different author, different premise, different everything, but some of the stuff is still going to be tangential. Like
Who's
here,
the writer of Cold Case?
James Warner Wallace, I believe.
Okay, I haven't even heard of him. But okay.
Let me see here. Cold Case Christianity,
we
James
got
Warner Wallace. Yeah, I was correct.
We got a
Let's see.
comment in the side chat. I just want to read real quick.
just a
Mrs.
few more.
Snarky says the Earth is fine-tuned for tentacle porn. I want to say I 100% agree and support this statement.
I do as well. In fact, there's been a few times where when I'm trying to click,
I don't want to hear a story about tentacle porn.
You're not going to hear a story about tentacle porn. But when I've tried to flip through the screens, my screen is faded to my background where people get to see just my random weeboo shit backgrounds.
Yeah, I noticed that there's been a couple of anime weeaboo waifus showing up in between cuts.
That's okay. Me and Pam get into arguments over who the better waifus are in Azure Lane.
Excellent.
She still thinks that it's Ping Hai, and I disagree.
more of them than what I was able to show in the picture.
Right now it's Greenheart, but
In fact, the number
your misconception is
But Greenheart isn't from Azure Lane. She's from Hyperdimension Neptunia.
in.
Uh-oh.
Uh
Uh-oh.
That was not your terminology.
It has begun.
It has begun. The waifu wars have begun.
We're going into the waifu wars.
The universe was fine-tuned for waifu wars.
This is the truth.
of dots around our imaginary gravity dial is so enormous that I struggle to comprehend the number. I can't make sense of
He
it.
struggles to comprehend a lot in this.
10 to the power of 60. If you want to know what that is, that's 1 followed by 60 zeros, which looks like this if you wanted to know. And to give you some context, that number is somewhere between the total number of cells in a human body. It's more than that, but less than the estimated number of subatomic particles in the entire universe. And that's
Is there a
just gravity.
point
That's
here?
how
I don't think
fine-tuned
so.
just one thing is.
I don't see a
there
point to
are 30
that.
or 40 other forces and ratios which also have to be set within an extremely narrow range, or the universe
mean,
would be uninhabitable.
Aren't
Just
there
saying
like
things are the way they are. I don't know. This is kind of
Couldn't
weird.
even be bothered writing them all out. There's more.
things are the way they are is about the best you
So
can get from this.
if you want to explain that fine-tuning from a naturalistic perspective, you have to rely on probability. And there are two ways that naturalists do this.
and what's wrong with
First
that?
is that they just say that we got lucky. The universe is just fine-tuned by chance, and it's just coincidence that so many forces and quantities are all perfectly aligned at the same time. And the majority of scientists have discarded that explanation because it's too improbable to be a good explanation.
No, they haven't.
When you factor in all of the finely tuned constants and ratios that there are, and you need to multiply them together to find the odds of the universe existing just as it does, you end up with the probability that's so tiny it becomes effectively zero.
No, it doesn't. There is no such thing as so tiny it's effectively zero. If it's above zero, it's not effectively zero.
Right. There's something about Christians and not understanding probability. I got into an argument with Darwin's deity one day about
Why? Why did you
the
do that?
law of large numbers. This is before I knew better. It's also before he started being scared of me and running. I think that happened first. So the thing that he wanted to do was he tried to say that the law of large numbers is that if you do something like flipping a coin, and you get 50, it's 50%. It's going to land on heads or tails. That ultimately you're going to wind up. If you do it like 1 billion times, it's going to wind up with a 50. It's going to wind up with the probability that is stated. So, like, say you flip a coin, and you flip a coin 1 billion times, it should wind up as being half and half, heads and tails, split between the billion.
Not necessarily.
Right. I mean, it's a should, like, it's a probabilistic thing that probabilistically the probability is going to reach that. Now, what he was trying to say is that this is absolutely true. And I just disagreed with him on that.
It's absolutely not true.
Right. So what he was saying, if you flip a coin 4,000 times, and it's all heads, and you flip it one more time, what is it going to be? And I said
There's
could be
50-50 chance it's going to be either
50-50 chance. And he said no. He said it's going to be heads because you've already flipped it 4,000 times.
No, that is not how that works.
Right.
If I shuffle this deck 20 times, and each time I shuffle it, I get Metamorphosis as my card. The 21st time I shuffle it, it's not going to be fucking Metamorphosis.
He didn't understand that his question was about one coin flip. He thought that because there's been other coin flips that would affect this coin flip, and that's how the law of large numbers works.
No, every coin flip you do does not affect the subsequent coin flip.
Right.
They're each independent.
We know that, but this seems like a thing with.
Of course, I know that. I play fucking card games.
Right. Good point. But this is a thing that seems to happen with Christians using probability in order to win arguments. Is that they don't understand how it fucking works. Like and the same thing here with chance on this is like, well, chance, if it's by chance, then it's impossible for the universe to result the way that it did. No, it's not.
If I throw a soda can over towards Pam, not that I would, though she might do that to me. I think you have done that to me, actually. But if I throw a soda can, or she throws one at me in retaliation because I'm a horrible person, there's a chance that soda can will hit her. There's a chance. Yeah. But there is no necessity behind it either hitting her or it not hitting her. There's no necessity behind any of that.
Here's a better question. Here's a better thing. If you throw a soda can across the room and it lands in a specific spot,
the subsequent soda cans don't have to hit it.
No, what are the chances that soda can would have landed in the spot that it did? Probably
there's a lot of math involved here,
right?
But low.
It's probably just really stupid low. It doesn't change the fact that it fucking happened. So, you have examples of things of extremely low probability happening. The universe exists. It happens to have the qualities that it does. You could make this an argument for a creator, but it doesn't necessitate one. It doesn't eliminate chance.
No, especially when you're dealing with the
still
fact that
explain it with chance.
And the probability of something that's already happened, it's effectively 1 now. Because it's already fucking happened. What's the probability that this thing happened? Are you asking the probability that it will happen again, or the probability that it happened? That it happened. Oh, well, then the answer is 1, because it's already fucking happened. Yeah. My cat is concerned. She's looking at me like, who are you talking to?
No one. In fact, no one.
They've grown so much.
All right, we're almost done with this damn video, guys. We got 3 minutes and 35 seconds left. Let's hit it.
So some other scientists have tried to find ways to increase the probability of getting a universe like ours by chance.
Have they?
They say perhaps if there was billions and billions and billions of universes, then there'd be a higher chance that just one of them might randomly have the degree of fine-tuning that we see in our universe. So they've developed what's called the multiverse theory. Maybe there's this mother...
It's not a fucking theory. Oh my god.
What? I'm not familiar with what the controversy is on that. What's
so,
your rant? What's up?
So he's talking about science. So I would assume that scientific terminology would apply, correct?
Theory? Oh, okay. You're saying that it's a hypothesis.
Yes. The multiverse has not been demonstrated. There's an entire argument about dark flow. There's an entire study into it and how forces outside of our universe affect things in our
Dark flow.
universe.
That sounds demonic as fuck.
But it's the idea of energy outside of our. It's the idea of energy outside of our universe.
Mega versus the occult. This goddamn atheist is fucking pagan, Satanist fuck.
Wait,
don't listen to him anymore.
How do you have those two things at the same time?
I don't know.
But
I'm warning everybody that they need to be spiritually guarded when they come up to you. Like, you need to start putting on your prayer armor when you start talking to this atheist, guys.
Wear the armor of God. I'm sorry, I have to say it in Master Apologist's voice. You need to wear the armor of God.
Have you heard of prayer armor before?
I've
heard that term.
I've heard armor of God, and I've heard prayer armor.
Prayer armor. That's one of my favorite terms. It's not super common. I haven't heard it very many times, like since like my childhood. But I used to hear prayer armor a lot. It's a fun one.
And pumps
anyway,
out
go
all these
ahead.
baby universes, and they all have different features and properties to one another. And we're lucky because we just happen to live in the one that's fine-tuned for life.
It's not that we're lucky; it's that by necessity we are in the one that would beget life. We couldn't.
Yeah.
Exist
What
in
if
the
what if we were in the one that didn't? Right. That's
like it's not a luck thing. It's by necessity you exist in the universe that would allow for your existence because it's impossible to exist anywhere else.
I'm just trying to posit like what we would be like if we were in the one that didn't allow us for it to exist. I don't think we'd be having this conversation.
No, probably not.
We wouldn't be able to complain about it, would we? So I don't know. Move on. Let's go.
But there are a few problems with that explanation. Firstly, there's absolutely no evidence for it. It's just speculation. It's just a theory.
I hear your trigger. Like I heard it. I didn't hear it through the microphone. I heard it through my ears. It came across Georgia and into my room. There was this click that went off in Cyrus' head.
And it's not just that.
It's just conjecture. It's just a theory.
It's not just that.
I heard it happen.
It's also the no evidence thing. So, for instance, someone could say that we don't have any hard evidence for multiverses. But we do have some evidence of multiverse. That's why there's a study into dark flow. You could argue that it's not good evidence. That's fine. I'm okay with that. In fact, I actually stand by that. I don't think it's good evidence. It's good evidence of something that we don't know, but it's not good evidence for a multiverse, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not an expert, but still, it's like saying that a philosophical argument is not evidence. You can argue that it's not good evidence. You could argue that it's not convincing evidence, but it's still a type of evidence. It could be bad evidence, but it's still fucking evidence. So if you're going to hold the issue that there's no evidence for this thing, then I'm just going to hold the issue that there's no evidence for Yahweh. And now we find ourselves at a very similar problem.
Right. You've heard me go on that soapbox before. Where it's like, if you're saying there's no evidence for Yahweh, then you're just ignoring that the Bible exists. But
if you're willing to say that about a scientific issue,
then it can be thrown right back at you.
I'm more than willing to say that you're throwing stones from a glass house.
Right.
And I don't even know how you'd go about finding evidence of a universe outside our universe.
Kill me. I don't know how.
Say?
He said, I don't know how you would even go about finding evidence of a universe outside of our universe. I don't know how you would even go about finding evidence for a supernatural realm outside our natural realm. If you're throwing stones from that glass house, then by all means, don't be...
He is standing on the porch of the glass house and hurling it, isn't he?
Yes. Like, if you
as a polytheist, I don't have a problem with the multiverse. And honestly, it's, works for me. What's the issue that he has with it? Because even with Christians, you could just say, well, God is the creator of the multiverse. Like, why
Or especially if why can God see all possible timelines? Well, because all possible timelines exist. And he sees them all at once because he's omniscient. He's not seeing forward into the future, is that the future has already happened in this universe over here. He's looking at that universe and saying, no, that's the future of this universe, but they exist separately. That still falls under Yahweh. It can all fall under Yahweh.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like... It seems like that if you hold to this, then Genesis skipped a few steps, but you could rejigger that. I don't know. This seems like he's... if he's freaking out about the multiverse, I get how the multiverse kind of like shucks with his fine-tuning argument a little bit, in that it makes naturalism like more of a more
Makes it
likely
more plausible.
Yeah, but like honestly, have been a polytheist holding to the multiverse. I've used it in argument before, so like I don't know why he wouldn't be able to.
Well, because because again, I don't know if this surface level apologetics is all that he knows.
Right.
It might be. If it is, then it would just be the fact that he doesn't know, so he sees that a multiverse is a point in the naturalistic category, and he's willing to cut off his nose to spite his face, simply to throw that stone. That would be if he's being honest. If he's being honest, that's what's happening.
If he's talking about evidence of it being outside the universe, and then he wouldn't... Like, that's something... As soon as he said that, he started criticizing his own position.
Yeah, that undermines your own deity.
Right. Like, how do we find evidence for something that's for a supernatural being outside the universe? This is you brought up initially. Like,
and that's why I don't like throwing that stone from a.
Where's he sitting? What's he doing?
Well, he's sitting on a porch made of glass and a seat made of glass and throwing a stone at the seat.
Like, I feel like that he threw a stone off of his porch and then like a boulder came back at him. Like that doesn't. It doesn't work. Anyway, we got 2 minutes and 46 seconds left of this fucking video.
I don't think we've got the tools to do that. Secondly, and this is pretty damning, the multiverse still needs to have a beginning. Scientists have figured this out. It has to have a beginning. So this theory is asking us not only to believe that...
if he goes, you can just apply the Kalam to the multiverse, but then you get into really wonky discussions of time, because time is supposed to be contained within this universe. You could posit like a time B, like I was talking about earlier for God. You can posit a time B for the multiverse, and then a time C for whatever the originator of that is. But I don't like. If you can definitely kick back for the multiverse. This is where I was saying is like he can fit this into Christianity. Is he going to do that? I don't know, but he could do it. It looks like he might be trying to. Let's hear him out.
Our universe came into existence for no particular purpose, but that a universe generator that births all these other billions of universes also came into existence from nothing and for no particular purpose. It seems to multiply problems rather than solve them. And
isn't that like a God that begs the question?
Part of being honest.
Would itself have to be finely tuned in order to be able to produce the variety of baby universes that would even give us the chance that just one might be able to be lived in. So naturalism fails to adequately explain how or why the fundamental properties of our universe are tuned so delicately for life. What does Christianity say? What's our message about this fine-tuning? We think the best explanation for fine-tuning is that someone fine-tuned the universe. That God tuned the universe perfectly for life. Isaiah chapter 45 verse 18.
Huh?
He who created the heavens, he is God. He who fashioned
That's just an assertion at that point, though.
He founded it. He did not create it to be empty. Paul Davies, who's a respected physicist.
Let's pause it again real quick. So here's one of the big differences between like Christianity, polytheism, and then atheism, is that this doesn't work for him as a Christian because he's trying to claim some kind of certainty. And I don't know if he's said that like in this, but this is a theme with Christians, that they are trying to use a lot of these arguments to say, see, you should be convinced by my position. With atheists, you'll have them demonstrating, well, there's uncertainty, therefore you should reject all of it, or put all of it away, or at least withhold judgment. And the polytheist is kind of in between these two, where we're not saying that there's complete certainty. We're not saying, but we're also not saying that because there's uncertainty, we can't have opinions. So, or that we can't like ask questions or explore them or posit things. If he's trying to do the former of these, like the Christian position of holding certainty, he's basing everything on just sheer assertion, which isn't certainty.
No, and that's why when you point to the Bible and you say that, well, the Bible says this about this issue. Okay, cool. That's wonderful that the Bible says that. Now, please tell me why I should care. Please get me to the point where that's relevant to me.
Right.
And if you can't get that to the point where that's relevant to me, then it's irrelevant. You've said a thing. You've given your reasons for it. I respect that that's why you believe. It's not a good reason for me to believe, though.
Right.
So, nah.
He says, there is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. And then there's this from Fred Hoyle, an astrophysicist. A common sense interpretation of the fact suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces, like chance, worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. The naturalist worldview says that there's no God, but it's unable to explain the beginning of the universe without him. And it can't account for the exquisitely balanced universe that we find ourselves in that appears to have been custom built for life.
That universe that's exquisitely balanced for child leukemia.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the thing that I like about the scientist quotes that he put up on the other hand, they don't seem like they could be quote mined, so I assume that he's being honest about them.
Mm-hmm.
That this is a discussion about arguments from seemings, and arguments from seemings is where you get a lot of spirituality. Like a lot of my arguments with polytheism rests a lot on arguments from seemings, arguments from face value interpretation of experience, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have necessarily a problem with that. Again, we get into this issue of that doesn't mean certainty. You can hold the position, fine. But where we run into issues with Christianity is where it goes like, well, now you need to believe that too, exactly because of these arguments. Well, I'm not necessarily convinced by those arguments.
Yeah, an argument from seemings doesn't seem like that would get you to any solid position. That would just get you to a tentative position.
Right.
But you can't tentatively hold Christianity.
It doesn't even get you to Christianity. That's the problem. Because, like you just said, now you're in a universe in which you need to explain things like child leukemia or bone cancer. Like now you're in this conversation where you start dealing with, like, this essentially is the Kalam. And you can either agree with the Kalam or not.
You can agree with the Kalam and get yourself to deism pretty quick.
Yeah, but you can agree with the Kalam and get yourself to a polytheistic faith. You can agree with the Kalam and get yourself to deism. You can agree with the Kalam and get yourself to Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Taoism, Hinduism, some forms of Hinduism, other forms no. But other forms of Kalam just doesn't even fucking matter. But like, it isn't getting him to where he wants to be. Now he has to contend with all these other philosophical problems, like Euthyphro dilemma. He has to contend with problem of evil. He has to contend with evidential problem of evil. He has to contend with divine hiddenness. If he's going to start trying to demonstrate his God, Kalam, you can get to, okay, well, God's coherent. You're not going to be able to get to, oh, well, this means you should follow Christianity. I think that's like the ultimate problem with this kind of apologetic, is it's going to be working best as a confirmation bias. It's not going to be working best as like convincing
actual
somebody who
confirmation
doesn't-
of Christianity.
Right. Like, you're not going to be able to convince somebody who's, especially when somebody's left Christianity because of one of those other reasons.
Well, I do have
Like,
I do have an objection. There is a way that he could square this with getting you strictly to Christianity
How?
by being a trapeze artist.
Is that a mental gymnastics thing?
Yes,
Did you do a mental gymnastics joke?
that's exactly what that is.
Because you said trapeze artist, and I imagined it in my head, and I realized that that was mental gymnastics.
Literally, imagining a trapeze artist is gymnastics in your head. It's mental gymnastics.
Colorado Biker Preppers says all worship Pongo the Gigantic, which I think it applies here. That this this gets you Pongo the Gigantic, assuming that Pongo the Gigantic is a creator entity that is outside of the universe. Great. Cool.
Everyone got it wrong. Barney the dinosaur is obviously a creator deity, and the Kalam gets you to his mercy.
All right.
15 seconds.
We got 15 seconds left.
Christianity, on the other hand, says that there's a wise and powerful God. He's exactly the kind of thing that could have caused the universe. And the simple...
Is he wise, though? Because having all
We have
knowledge
6
doesn't...
seconds left, and you paused it.
Look, when you say something wrong...
explanation for fine-tuning is that he designed the universe with life in mind.
Then he's a dick-ass engineer.
All right, so now we're at black screen. And I think that, like, everything that I just said a second ago applies here. That he didn't save himself in the last 15 seconds, and I didn't expect him to.
No.
Where the best that he can do, and that's what he did, was he can say, Kalam is a thing, Christian God fits it. Does that mean, therefore, you should believe in the Christian God?
No, it doesn't follow.
First, it doesn't prevent you from putting forward other theologies. Second, it doesn't eliminate naturalism. Right?
No, not really.
See, it doesn't prevent other theologies, it doesn't eliminate naturalism. And then on top of that, thirdly, it doesn't actually address any of the other issues with Christianity that honestly, beyond the Kalam, I find more pressing, such as the morality of hell or any of these other things. It doesn't this apologetic doesn't address those things. And honestly, what I find when people leave Christianity in college, sometimes it's from a discussion on evolution, sometimes it's a discussion from the creation of the universe, but that's not usually it. Because Christians can use those things and fit it into Christianity. I did for some time. I was a Christian that believed in both evolution and this old universe. I just believed that God was the creator of the universe, the Christian God. But the reasons why I left Christianity had much more to do with the logistics of God, the morality of God, what I was actively worshiping, and what the explanation is with all the spirituality around it. And I think that's a big reason why people leave Christianity, is because it's kind of a moral fuck up.
I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why I've said it in a few videos, and I'll say it again here. If we found that the Christian God was the true God, and the things that he's purported to do in the Bible are true, you haven't made me a Christian. You've made me a mesotheist.
Right.
That's all you've effectively done, is you've turned me from an atheist to a mesotheist. Because now you've given me an enemy. That's all you've really done here. And if the God can bleed.
Did you just go Batman on that shit? All right.
Is he really a god if he can bleed?
I just imagined you in like heavy armor, like looking at Yahweh in the face and going like,
"Are you God? Do you bleed?" Is that from Batman v Superman? Because I haven't actually seen that movie.
It's from Batman versus Superman. It's also from a shitload of other things, and it's also from Dark Knight Returns.
Is it from Dark? Is the Do You Bleed from Dark Knight?
I
Oh
believe it
yeah,
is.
no.
All the iconic lines in that movie are Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, that's right. Because when he got Green Arrow to fire the kryptonite into his oxygen, and Superman breathed it, he's like, "I didn't want to beat you. I wanted to show the world that you can bleed."
And then all the stuff like about the philosophical speak that he was doing during the fight itself. I don't remember any of the quotes, but that's all. Because I read Dark Knight Returns and then I went to see Batman v Superman. That was just a terrible fucking idea. This is a conversation about spirituality, right?
Yes. You know. There's actually a good movie adaptation of Dark Knight Returns, right?
Is it the cartoon?
It's the one that's actually called Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2.
Yeah. Right.
That one's actually good.
DC animated, right?
Yes.
No.
DC animated is way better than DCEU.
I just don't like the animation style of that stuff. Anyway, so we've just kind of sussed out this dude. Why we did that, I don't know, but we did it.
Yeah. Well, you hadn't seen Part 2, so you were missing half of his argument.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The part where he could possibly I'm
gonna have to convert to Christianity soon because this guy's just like knocked it out of the park for me.
We live in a universe fine-tuned to create this.
I just want to point out though that the problem isn't necessarily that I disagree with him on a whole lot. The problem is that it doesn't
get you to his God.
It doesn't get me to where he wants me to go. And that's the huge problem with it. I have like a lot of issues with what he's saying. But it doesn't, like my strongest issue is going to be that this doesn't produce any kind of certainty on the level that Christianity is wanting you to accept that it does. And that's going to be my big problem with it.
Yeah, and that's the honest problem to have though. I think the thing that I've said most in the 2 episodes that I did on this guy was that the arguments weren't honest. Because if they were honest, then he would have to say that these don't necessarily get you to our God, but they can get you closer to a God. And that's why I believe. Not these arguments get you to certainty, and that's why you should believe. One of those is not a statement.
Like what I've noticed with
I think you've learned by looking at my channel. I don't give a shit what the audience thinks sometimes.
Right, but the audience that's it's true. But the audience that he's speaking to are ones that want to have affirmation. So he's going to word it in such a way. And there's a danger to this as well, because a lot of the people that just watch this, they're going to go try these arguments out on people. And then, they might bump into somebody like you or me. And it's going to be like, I can even grant you your premises and it still doesn't get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, I think we had a whole conversation in a Waffle House about how much of Christianity can you grant and still not have have Yahweh the God.
I've even had fun granting the resurrection. They still have trouble. So
Colorado Biker Prepper says, Cyrus, well then we don't give a fuck about you either then.
Look at that.
Hey.
Started a war.
Remember, I didn't say that I don't care about my audience. I said that I don't care what they think sometimes. Which is true. Because I care what I think, and I would assume that
Mrs. Starkey's coming after you too.
That's fine. That's fine with me. You don't care what I think. I curse thee, Cyrus, in the name of Peter Pan. Well, if there is one deity that I'm a mesotheist towards, it is Peter Pan, the peanut butter god. That's one deity I can get behind hating.
That's funny.
That joke will never die. It's going to continue for the life of my channel. I don't know how I feel about that.
It'll die and then be resurrected.
3 days later, of course.
Right.
Jesus had a worse respawn time. Never let him play Call of Duty.
Believe in Jif. Or he died for your jelly.
He died for your jelly?
Yes. He returned. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. This is a terrible metaphor. Let's end this.
I'm sure there's 2 slices of bread that you can call the body of Christ for that joke.
Do we have an exiting tagline? Happy Thursday, all of you assholes. Thank you for sticking with us this entire time.
Yeah, this is the longest episode we've done, but there was the most to suss out on this one.
You suffered through this with us, and we appreciate you for it. This was fun and frustrating, and we yelled a lot. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, thank you guys for coming out. Definitely enjoyed the conversation, and I will, now that once I don't have to worry about the screens flickering up all the time, I will be putting a link to Ocean's debate that he had on Modern Day Debate's channel in the description. Please go check that out, and subscribe to Modern Day Debate as well. He's got a good channel for people sussing out their different points of view.
He does. He's got Christians debating other Christians. He's got Christians debating atheists. He does have people, like, it's a lot of them are really good debates. Every once in a while, there's two people that are really uninformed hitting each other, and that can be entertaining in its own right. But
two people with two red herrings, just
like, yeah, dude. I saw one that was on the historicity of Christ, and the guy that was putting up the dissent against the historicity of Christ started bringing up zeitgeist arguments, and I was mad. I frothed at the mouth, literally, and destroyed half of my apartment. Listening to that debate. But Modern Day Debate is a good channel. You should check him out. There are some really good debates on there, and there's a couple that'll just make you pull out your hair. This is why I'm bald. I listened to that debate. So, anywho, with that, I'm out. Do you have any exiting statements, Cyrus?
No. I think this has been long enough. The exiting statement is that I stick by what I said when I originally reviewed this guy's video. It doesn't get you where he wants you to get you. So,
cool.
That's where we are. That said, thank you all.